Time Quest: Reversal of Fate. By Tina Folsom. Copyright 2021, Tina Folsom. This audiobook was narrated by AI. Chapter 1. Romeo, Oh Romeo. Los Angeles, Friday, July 20, 2085. The one-week training at the Institute for Time Travel had come to its end. For 7 days, recruits, young men just like Carter Ambrose, had gotten a crash course in life in the year 2025. Historian after historian, all ancient by Carter's measure, had droned on about details that could lull even an insomniac into a deep sleep. The several hundreds of recruits, ranging in age from 18 to 25, exhibited varying attention spans. All they wanted was to get on with it. But Professor Henley, the gray-haired man who ran the program, was leaving the best for last, the details about their upcoming voyage through time. The prospect of time travel was why the professor, with the blessing of the government, had been able to recruit lots of young men willing to risk their lives in service of humankind. What young man wouldn't leap at the chance of traveling to the past? It was an adventure, and the main reason Carter had signed up. His parents were proud of him, and his sisters anxious, but hopeful that he would come back unharmed, and with his mission completed. At a tapping sound coming from the loudspeakers in the large amphitheater-style auditorium, the crowd fell silent. Everybody turned their attention to Professor Henley, who stood at a small podium. The wall behind him and the floor beneath his feet were an ever-changing screen of graphics used to illustrate the speaker's points. The walls and floor now turned a vibrant blue, then faded in places until the same word materialized everywhere. Romeos. That's what we've decided to call your group, Professor Henley said in a deep baritone voice. There were some murmurs, but nobody spoke up or posed a question. They knew better than to waste the professor's time. I'll explain why later, but let me begin by reiterating how urgent and important your mission is. Behind him, charts appeared. Carter barely glanced at them. He'd seen them before and knew what they meant, because his father was one of the men, one of the scientists, who'd been instrumental in alerting the government to the severity of mankind's predicament. The human race survived many calamities in the last century. The climate crisis that devastated our shores and coastal cities with rising ocean levels and caused the great fires that laid waste to the Amazon forest, the wars that had to be fought to rid ourselves of dictators and tyrants, the race riots that pitted neighbor against neighbor. We cured HIV. We eradicated world hunger and poverty, we reversed climate change and are nursing this planet back to health. But the 2025 pandemic that killed over 50 million people all over the world still haunts us today. We thought we'd escaped its clutches, but it was a mere illusion. He let out a mirthless laugh. Nobody in the room breathed. When the virus that originated on the South American continent spread across the globe in the fall and winter of 2025, many governments reacted too late to mitigate the spread. We had no idea that this virus was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It embedded itself in the females of our species, in the survivors of the pandemic. There, it remained undetectable for decades, mutating many times over. Even our best scientists were blindsided when it struck us at the core of our existence, procreation. Since the 2050s, birth rates worldwide have been dropping precipitously, yet the true cause wasn't detected until 2069. Too late. 99% of the world's female population are now infertile, incapable of creating new life. Behind the professor, the graphs and pictures changed. Empty cribs and maternity wards popped up and created an eerie collage. This is where you come in. You, the Romeos. He showed a hint of a smile for having come up with this moniker. We need you to travel back to before the outbreak of the virus to find those women of childbearing age who, according to historical records, died from the disease. We need you to find them, befriend them, romance them, hence Romeos, and bring them to our time, to 2085, before they can get infected and become worthless to us." Carter raised an eyebrow. "Bad choice of words, Professor." Even Carter, as a 20-year-old, knew more about women than to call them worthless. "Questions before I go on?" Over 100 hands went up. Professor Henley pointed to a man in the first row. "You." He glanced at the name tag. "Joshua Fletcher." "Why can we only bring back women who died during that pandemic? Wouldn't we have a better choice if we widened our criteria? I mean, what if they're all ugly?" Several recruits laughed. Others rolled their eyes. Professor Henley narrowed his eyes. "Because you want to return to the world you left, don't you? You want to come back to this version of 2085, not another." He looked into the crowd, where enough recruits looked confused for the professor to find it necessary to elaborate. "If you had listened to Mrs. Dorchester, who explained quantum physics and the space-time continuum to you, you wouldn't be staring back at me like clueless fish." He sighed. "Well then, a refresher. If you were to pluck one random woman out from 2025 and transplant her to 2085, you will have changed the course of history. Imagine this woman was going to have a child, who then went on to make an important discovery in medicine, physics, chemistry, city planning, or even art. The absence of that person, that child and its descendants, would mean that our future, the world we live in right now, would become different. You will have created a new timeline, one in which your loved ones might not exist." "You mean like if Albert Einstein's mother were to come back with one of us before she gave birth to him?" one recruit called out. "Exactly. We've carefully selected from the pool of women who died during the 2025 pandemic, so we won't have to worry about a disruption in the space-time continuum. Only the women destined to die may be brought back to our time. It is the only rule you may never break, no matter the circumstances." Then he looked at Joshua Fletcher. "No matter how ugly the woman assigned to you is." That comment resulted in raucous laughter of the crowd and a beet-red face for Joshua. Carter drew one side of his mouth up. He'd had the same thought as Joshua, but was smarter. He simply hadn't voiced it, or he would have been the one with the red face. Chapter 2. Gadgets Galore. Moments after Professor Henley's presentation, the large group was split up into several smaller ones. Carter's group of 24 recruits was the first to be led into the large elevator that descended to the lowest level of the large complex. "Level A authorization needed for access," the recorded elevator voice announced just before the elevator stopped. The older woman who wore a white lab coat looked into the scanner, and a moment later the automated voice confirmed, "Retinal scan accepted." The doors opened. "Turn left to the first room. My colleague is expecting you," she instructed. The moment the last recruit had exited the elevator, she stepped back inside, and the doors closed behind her. Carter was the first to reach the open door. He entered the large room. It was bright, with white walls made of the same sort of shiny material all laboratories were equipped with to keep the area sterile. In fact, the underground room looked very much like a laboratory, even though there seemed to be no experiments going on. Instead, the long counter was clean but not empty. On it, large envelopes, rather thick ones, were waiting for them, one for each recruit. Behind the counter stood a good-looking woman who was at most 35 years old. "Recruits," she greeted them and motioned for them to approach. "Please each stand in front of one of the envelopes. You'll find everything you need for your mission in 2025 inside it." As the recruits spread out along the long, shiny counter, Carter ended up right in front of the woman. He was about to reach for the envelope when she lifted it and reached into it. When she pulled something from it and lifted it for all to see, she said, "First, make yourselves familiar with your standard cell phone." She handed it to Carter, and, like his fellow recruits, he turned it over and examined it. This is state-of-the-art in the year 2025. The iPhone 17. Carter exchanged a doubting look with the guy next to him. "Not even my grandmother would use something so antiquated," he murmured to his neighbor. "Yeah, my sister would throw it at me." "Cheap junk," the other recruit replied. The instructor slapped her fist on the counter to silence everybody. "It may be antiquated, cheap junk in your eyes, but in 2025, guys like you stood in line for days just to get their hands on one. And just so you're aware of it, this phone is the precursor of the communication devices we all use today. Without the innovation of the men and women working at Apple back in the day, the technology we have available today may never have been developed." Nobody dared say another critical word. There's an instruction manual already loaded to your holocom. Make yourselves familiar with it before your time jump. Instinctively, Carter touched his holocom, the slim band around his left wrist that was invisible to anyone but the wearer. It was developed from studying the chameleon's ability to take on colors and textures of its environment. Once put around the wearer's wrist, it blended with its owner's skin. The holocom was the iPhone of 2085, only more advanced, faster, and seemingly without limits. A hologram suddenly popped up and hovered over Carter's left arm. "Not now," the instructor groused in an annoyed tone. "Apologies," Carter said quickly and closed the hologram. She pulled a second item from the bag and lifted it in the air. "This is your wallet. It contains a valid driver's license with your details. Study them. Your birth dates were adjusted so that you're the exact same age in 2025 as you are now. Make sure you know your new birth year. There's also a card with your social security number on it. Memorize it." Somebody at the other end of the counter raised his hand. "Yes," the instructor prompted. "What's a social security number?" "It's the equivalent of your global ID number, only with less digits." "Okay, next. Everybody also has a small amount of cash in his wallet. The money stems from the historical archives, therefore supply was limited. Use this cash only if you can't pay by any other means. Your iPhone contains several payment apps in use in 2025, which have been linked to valid corporate accounts during that time and should not be flagged until you're safely back here. The payment apps work in a similar way as your holocom. Paper money didn't exist anymore. All payments were made digitally, either using one's personal holocom or through an electronic transfer initiated at various mobile pay spots using a retinal scan for identification. He couldn't imagine how disorganized life was in 2025 when money was spread around in different places, where it could easily get lost or stolen. Again, the instructor reached into the envelope. This time she pulled out 2 watches, one in black, the other in silver. "These are your time travel devices. The black one for you, the silver one for the woman you're bringing back. They are paired. The silver one will only work in conjunction with the black one." Everybody was already trying on their time travel watch. The instructor handed Carter his gadgets. "Recruits, please wait in the room next to this one. You'll be called up individually to receive the details of your mission. Good luck." Carter saw something in her eyes when she wished them good luck. Was it the same sentiment that his sisters had expressed, his 2 sisters who would never bear children of their own? Had he seen the flash of hope that one day soon, the cries of babies would fill maternity wards and homes once more? Chapter 3. Mission Possible. The waiting room was just as sparse as the room where the Romeos had received their equipment, with one difference. The walls acted as seamless monitors that showed a series of refreshers about how to behave in 2025, which rules to abide by, and how to use the devices issued to them. In the middle of the room, 24 chairs were arranged in a circle facing outward so that each recruit could watch the projections effortlessly. Carter had barely started to watch the videos when he was called into a separate, much smaller room. There was only one desk and 2 chairs. It reminded Carter of interrogation rooms he'd seen in classic movies made in the 2020s. "I'm Dr. Mandel," the black man said and shut the door behind Carter. He was in his mid-40s and sported a goatee. He wore a lab coat with his name laser imprinted on it. Embroidery had gone out of style. "Take a seat." Carter followed the command and watched Dr. Mandel tap on a spot on the desk. A large hologram opened up. First, random numbers and letters appeared, while Dr. Mandel tapped on the desk's virtual keyboard. Finally, a file opened up, showing the picture of a young woman in the upper left-hand corner. Carter homed in on the image. The girl couldn't be more than 18 or 19 years old. Her long hair was dark brown, her eyes a pretty blue. But what made her truly beautiful was her smile, open and unpretentious, warm and inviting. "You're assigned to Julie Schneider, a sophomore at UCLA. She will contract the virus at the beginning of October 2025, at the start of the new semester. Within 2 days, she's hospitalized and in a coma. She will die on October 8th without regaining consciousness." Tragic. "She's so young," Carter said, and thought of his own sisters. They were 11 and 12, yet already wise beyond their years. They were the last of their generation. There would be no more if the Romeo project didn't succeed. She turns 20 in August of 2025. "We've accumulated all the information we were able to get our hands on. School reports, social media postings, legal documents, anything we could find in the historical archives. She was prolific in documenting her life on social media. Thank God for Facebook and Instagram, right?" Carter shrugged. "I guess." Truth be told, he couldn't imagine why people in 2025, and the entire first quarter of the 21st century, were so keen on posting every detail of their private lives on a public platform for anybody to see. "Well, I don't see the appeal of it myself either," Mandel confessed. He pulled in a breath. "At least, this gives you enough information on her to make a quick inroad into her life. You'll have 6 months to win her over." Carter chuckled. "I don't need 6 months, trust me. Give me 6 weeks and she'll be putty in my hands." Mandel sighed. "Ah, I see, we have an overconfident jerk on our hands. Nothing new there." "I'm not a..." "Don't continue digging when you're already in a hole, Mr. Ambrose." Carter suppressed the curse sitting on his lips. "Your father told us about you." That really pissed him off. His father had encouraged him to be one of the first to sign up for the program. His father had told him that he believed in him, yet he'd gone behind Carter's back. "After I sign up to help my people, my father badmouths me." Now Mandel was the one chuckling. "He wasn't bad-mouthing you. He called you a hothead. He's not wrong. He also told us that you needed a challenge, otherwise you won't take the job seriously." "A challenge?" Mandel nodded and motioned to the hologram. "The girl is a virgin." Chapter 4. Time Jump or Bust. Dr. Mandel ushered Carter through a second door into yet another waiting room. It was as bland as the previous one, and there were no videos gracing the walls. Carter was still digesting the news that the woman, or rather girl, he was supposed to romance and bring back to 2085 was a virgin. Not that Carter hadn't slept with a virgin before, he had. Once. He hadn't exactly found it enjoyable, and wasn't planning on repeating the experience. The girl didn't know what she was doing, and the whole thing had been one epic failure. And now he had to romance a virgin to save humankind. Was somebody having a good laugh at his expense? "Thanks a lot, Dad," he grumbled under his breath. He had a good relationship with his father, better than most teenagers and 20-somethings. But there were times when the two of them butted heads. Well, Carter had to make the best of the situation. He took a seat in the waiting room and first studied the manual of the time travel device. The instructions were easy: set the time and date to where you want to time travel and engage. Confident that he could handle the watch, he pulled up the girl's file on his holocom to study it. Julie Schneider was indeed a prolific user of a social media site named Instagram. He was able to get a good impression of what she enjoyed doing in her free time, who her friends were, and that she was a good student. He got to the end of her posts on social media and realized that they ended over a week before she was admitted to hospital with the virus. Odd. Why would a girl who posted daily, several times a day in fact, suddenly stop? He pulled up her hospital chart and read through the doctor's notes. The onset of Julie's symptoms occurred on October 4th. From one of the lectures during the one-week training, Carter knew that the incubation time of the virus was short and lay somewhere between 2 and 3 days. This meant that Julie was infected with the virus on October 2nd. She was admitted to the hospital in serious condition on October 6th and fell into a coma the same day. However, her last post on Facebook was on September 26th, a full week before she felt sick. Why had Julie suddenly stopped posting to her social media accounts? There had to be a reason for it. He clicked to download all of her social media accounts. In addition, he initiated a search of all official records for the week before she was admitted to the hospital and clicked on Save to Holocom. The records were already downloaded, but he didn't get a chance to look at them. There was a sudden sound in the room, and Carter looked up. "You must be Carter Ambrose, the first traveler. Please come in." From a side door, an Asian man in his 50s, tall and lean, with a full head of dark hair and piercing green eyes, motioned him into a smaller room. Carter had heard about him. He was the head of the Time Quest program, a government-funded institution that had been working for decades on making time travel possible. "Dr. Hong," Carter said, and extended his hand upon entering the room that was furnished with a machine that consisted of several giant wheels and a vast amount of components that reminded Carter of the inside of a clockwork. "It's an honor." Dr. Hong shook his hand. "I see you've heard of me." "Heard? I've followed your career ever since I learned to use my holocom." Dr. Hong smiled. "Thank you." He seemed to notice Carter's gaze resting on the machine, and motioned to it. "Our first prototype. The size is obviously very impractical, but it helped us understand the workings. It looks amazing." Dr. Hong chuckled. "Well, let's get you started. First, I need your holocom." With raised eyebrows, Carter asked why. Once a person received their personal holocom at age 5, it was practically never removed. It was dynamic and grew with the person. "I'll have to remove everything related to our time period in case it falls into the wrong hands. You'll retain all files you'll need for your trip, which were saved directly to the holocom. However, once you arrive in 2025, there won't be any more live updates from our servers, because those servers, in fact, don't exist yet." Carter understood. But will the holocom still work at all? It will. It gets continually recharged by your own body's energy. But you won't receive any new information. nor will you be able to communicate with anybody, even the other recruits who are sent to the same time and the same space. You'll be on your own. Dr. Hong reached out his hand, and Carter removed the device from his arm and placed it in the doctor's palm. Dr. Hong walked to a desk and put the holocom into a cradle. Carter followed him and watched as he pulled up the holocom's settings and changed them. He worked faster than Carter's eyes could follow. "It's all done," Dr. Hong said finally, and handed back the holocom. "And remember, like they told you in your training, you'll have to remove your holocom when you shower in 2025. The chlorine they used to put into their water supplies back then will corrode your holocom and may cause it to malfunction." "Understood." Carter nodded. "Good. Now, the only files you'll find on your holocom are the instructions about how to troubleshoot the time travel watches, how to operate the iPhone you were issued, a map of today's LA, which you'll need in order to plan your return location, as well as the files on your target." Target. Another bad choice of words. Could these scientists not just use girl or woman? But Carter would never dare criticize Dr. Hong. He was his hero. And when Time Quest was successful in bringing civilization back from the brink, he would be everybody's hero. "I'll give you an hour to familiarize yourself with the files on your holocom, then we'll send you back to 2025. "I'm ready now. I've already memorized all there is to know about the woman," Carter said. He couldn't bring himself to use the word target. "Very well then. 2 things before we get started. The watch has a limited capacity. Once you're in the past, there's only enough power left to come home. So don't be tempted to initiate a second time jump farther back into the past to make up for any mistakes you may have made in trying to convince your target to come with you. If you do that, you'll be stuck in the past for good." Understood. "Yes, and the second thing. The time jump home will automatically be initiated at 2 a.m. on Monday, September 29, 2025, unless you initiate the jump earlier. This is a failsafe in case you get incapacitated. Make sure your target is wearing her silver watch by then and is with you, or she will be left behind." Understood. Let's do it. "Oh, I almost forgot. You will arrive at the same location as this building, since you're not moving in space, just in time. In 2025, this is a cemetery in Westwood, close to UCLA. Your iPhone will help you find your way. Switch it on once you arrive. It will automatically connect to the free Wi-Fi service in Los Angeles." Carter nodded. "I'm ready. Please set your watch to March 25th at 9 p.m. Carter tapped a number of times to get the watch to show the correct time and date. Done. When you're ready, press the 2 buttons on each side of the clock face simultaneously. It will initiate the time jump. Good luck." Carter nodded, then reached out his hand to shake the doctor's once more. "I'll see you again soon." Moments later, Carter touched his watch and felt for the buttons on each side of the watch face. His hands were suddenly clammy, and his index finger slipped. He looked up and noticed the doctor watching him. Not wanting to look inept, Carter cast him a confident look, then pressed the buttons without looking. Suddenly, everything around him seemed to dissolve into pixels. His body remained still, yet the world around him swirled and turned so fast that the different colors blended and became the sum of all colors. A whiteness spread around him, before the light dimmed, and the pixels assembled again and formed a new world around him. He saw gravestones all around him and white crosses and knew he'd arrived. He pumped his fist. "I did it." Following Dr. Hong's orders, Carter took out his cell phone and switched it on. It took only seconds for it to connect to the publicly available Wi-Fi. But before he could go to the map application to find his way, the home screen showed him the date, Thursday, September 25, 2025. Shock coursed through him. Fuck. He'd arrived less than a week before his scheduled return to 2085. Something had seriously gone wrong. He was so screwed. Chapter 5. Co-ed in Pink. Los Angeles, Thursday, September 25, 2025, 9:25 p.m. In her new room in the house she shared with 7 other girls who attended UCLA, Julie Schneider looked at the boxes she'd dragged up the stairs to the second floor earlier in the day. Finally, she had a room all to herself. The first 2 years at UCLA, she'd lived in the dorms and had shared a room with a girl whose snoring could have raised the dead. While Kathleen was otherwise a considerate roommate, the lack of a good night's sleep had gotten to Julie. Julie spun around her own axis, happy to finally have a private space, and at the same time still enjoy the company of others. The 3-story house was massive, one of those old mansions that at some time in the past had belonged to a rich family with several servants. It was located in Westwood, close enough to walk to campus, as well as the village of Westwood with its coffee shops, movie theaters, cute boutiques, bars, and restaurants. The rent was a little on the steep side, but she still had savings from her part-time job at a local coffee shop. Life couldn't be more perfect. She pulled out her cell phone and snapped a quick selfie with the boxes behind her. Happy with the picture, she created an Instagram post with the caption, "Moving Day. Love my new room, #privacy, #unpacking, #UCLA junior, #adulting." She clicked share to Facebook, then posted it. Done, she said to herself. There was a knock at the door. Come in. Tanya, her black housemate, popped her head in. How are you coming along with unpacking? Julie motioned her to enter, and Tanya followed the invitation. I didn't know I had so much stuff, Julie said and plopped onto the bed. That's nothing. You should have seen how many boxes I had. A girl needs things, especially in her junior year. It'll probably take me days to unpack. Tanya shook her head. We can't have that. There's a party over at one of the fraternities tomorrow night. Trust me, I won't have time for it. I still have to organize all my papers and books and, stuff, Julie said. Besides, she wasn't one to party much. She always felt uncomfortable at events where she didn't know anyone. She was practically tongue-tied when she had to speak to any man under 30, particularly if the guy was handsome on top of it. Her mother had sent her to an all-girls high school, which meant she had no experience interacting with boys. The first 2 years at UCLA, she'd been so immersed in her studies, trying to do well in all subjects, and had only very occasionally gone to mixed events. Tanya waggled her index finger at Julie. You're not missing out on this party. Not on my watch. We're all going. I'm just gonna have to help you unpack. Before Julie could stop her, Tanya walked to one of the boxes and pulled the lid open. She looked inside, then tossed Julie a what the fuck look. You weren't joking about books and papers, were you? Julie shrugged. I warned you. Where are all your clothes, shoes, handbags, jewelry, makeup? Julie pointed to a medium-sized suitcase that she'd opened earlier. One side contained a few pairs of shoes, toiletries, and underwear. The other side was filled with comfortable summer clothes. There. Tanya let out an exasperated breath. That's an overnight bag where I come from. She kneeled down on the floor next to the suitcase and rummaged through it. Finally, she looked up and shook her head. Girl, we've got work to do. Tanya got up and walked to the door. What are you doing? I thought you were helping me unpack, Julie said. Getting reinforcements. Tanya popped her head out into the hallway and called out loudly, Girls, we've got a fashion emergency up here in Julie's room. Fashion emergency. Tanya was calling her a fashion emergency. Julie cringed internally. Right now, Kathleen's snoring didn't sound so bad after all. But there was no going back now. She could already hear several girls racing up the stairs to come to her aid, even if Julie didn't think she needed it. Chapter 6. The Time Traveler, Identity. Los Angeles, Friday, September 26, 2025. Carter had spent the night he arrived in 2025 in a small motel near the university campus, pissed at himself for having somehow screwed up his time jump. His night was restless. The thought of failing in his mission and disappointing the people who counted on him kept him awake until he finally fell asleep well after midnight. When he woke, it was already midday. He showered, using the motel's tiny shampoo and soap samples. He'd never seen anything like it. Why were there no built-in dispensers in the bathroom? Didn't these people know how wasteful the packaging was, or that one day the plastic would cause a major environmental crisis, leading to the extinction of countless species of fish? It had taken scientists the better part of 2 decades to nurse the oceans back to health. Well, apparently climate change was still not being taken seriously in 2025. The clothes Carter wore were vintage 2025, rather skinny pants made of a thick blue cloth. Jeans, the instructor who'd taught the recruits about fashion, had called them. No man in 2085 wore them. When birth rates had started to drop in the 2050s, medical researchers first thought that clothing that was too tight around a man's crotch caused low sperm count. As a result, tight pants, particularly jeans, had gone out of style. By the time the researchers had discovered that the low birth rate was, in fact, attributable to a mutated gene in the DNA of females, men had already gotten used to other pants, and manufacturers had switched to different materials. From the small backpack that he'd brought from 2085, similar to the ones often used by university students to carry their books in 2025, he pulled a fresh shirt and slipped it over his head. He actually liked the cool cotton on his skin and the casualness of his clothes. In the future where he came from, people dressed differently. Clothes were more formal and streamlined. Fashion wasn't on the forefront of everybody's mind anymore. The population of 2085 had other things to worry about, the continuation of their species. And now it was Carter's duty to fix what he'd messed up during the time jump, because failure wasn't an option. He could never face his father again if he failed in this mission. He needed to make this right. Without the luxury of time to get to know Julie and make her fall in love with him, he had to go on the charm offensive and sweep her off her feet in a day or two. But first, he had to find her. The information downloaded to his holocom showed the address where she had lived in March 2025. He would start there, knock at her door, and come up with some pretense to make her acquaintance. Then he would wing it and hope for the best. He did his best work on the fly. Improvisation had always been his strength. It took Carter a while to find his bearings and locate the student dorms at the edge of the UCLA campus. The problem was that he couldn't simply walk in without a student ID. Unfortunately, the security guard seemed to be glued to the entrance. For a good half hour, Carter watched from a distance, but the guard didn't take a break. However, whenever a student entered the building, he only casually glanced at the person's ID. This fact gave Carter an idea. When the next male student exited the building, Carter walked into the direction the guy was heading to cut him off. He fell into a quick sprint and crossed the student's path, colliding with him. They both stumbled, though Carter had been prepared and was only faking his fall. "Man, sorry," Carter apologized quickly and offered a hand to help the guy up. "What the fuck, dude?" the other griped. "Can't you look?" Carter used both hands to help him up. "Honestly, so sorry. I was just trying to catch up with my friend. I totally didn't see you." Sorry. Finally, the student was on his feet and adjusted the backpack he'd slung over one shoulder. Yeah, all right. Next time, just look. Then he stomped off. Carter turned back in the direction of the student housing complex and opened his palm. In it, he held a student ID in the name of Thomas Stone. Thanks for your help, Thomas Stone, he said to himself and walked to the entrance. Carter was right about the guard. He glanced at the ID, recognized it as a valid student ID, but didn't look too closely to recognize that the picture didn't resemble Carter, and motioned him to enter. Carter had memorized the floor and number of Julie's dorm room, which she shared with another girl, Kathleen. Nobody took any notice of him when he made his way up to Julie's floor and looked for her room. Having found it, he stood there for a moment. What would he say to her? He took a few breaths and lifted his hand to knock, but the door opened inward before he could. The girl opening the door wasn't Julie. She looked at him, startled. Can I help you? Hi, I'm Carter. I was looking for Julie. He tossed her a disarming smile, and the girl returned it. Still got it, he thought to himself. He wasn't a fool. He knew that he was good-looking and appealed to a wide range of women. And he wasn't too proud to use what he'd been given in the looks and charm department. Oh, hi, I'm Kathleen, her roommate. She giggled. Actually, she's not here. She doesn't actually live in the dorms anymore. Maybe there's something I can help you with, since Julie isn't here. Oh yeah, he knew that look. It would take him all but a half hour to get this beauty between the sheets. Unfortunately, he didn't have that kind of time. Carter forced himself to smile charmingly. Oh, that's a shame. I wish you could help me, but I really need to see Julie. I'm from her hometown in Minnesota. My mom, a friend of Julie's mom, asked me to look her up. He leaned in and lowered his voice. My mom can be very insistent. Oh, Kathleen said, smiling. Mine too. Carter grinned. Yeah, right. So do you know where I can find her? She gave me her new address in case I got any mail for her. Why don't I text it to you? What's your cell phone number? She was already pulling her cell phone out. Carter had no intention of giving Kathleen his number. It would only complicate things. He grimaced. Unfortunately, somebody stole my phone at the airport. Can you write it down for me? Oh God, no cell phone in Los Angeles. You're really stranded. She didn't know the half of it. Let me grab a pen and paper. A few moments later, she was back and pressed a slip of paper with the address into his hand. She now lives in a house with a bunch of other girls. I might do that for my senior year. I'm kind of done sharing a bedroom, you know. Sometimes I just want my privacy. She tossed him a suggestive look. So, if you run into any trouble, she pointed to the phone number at the bottom of the paper, that is my number. Call me anytime. Carter pocketed the piece of paper and smiled. Thank you, Kathleen. You're a lifesaver. He turned and marched down the hallway to where he'd come from. Chapter 7. To Fraternity Row, I Go. Los Angeles, Friday, September 26, 2025, 7:55 p.m. Julie looked at herself in the mirror. She wasn't wearing a stitch of her own clothing, other than her panties and bra. The shoes weren't hers. Nor was the skimpy dress that barely covered her legs to mid-thigh. Not to mention how much of her cleavage was visible. Her mother would have never allowed her to leave the house like this. What her father's opinion on the subject was, she didn't know. He hadn't played a part in her life since her parents had divorced when Julie was 4. If she hadn't seen photos of him, she wouldn't even know what he looked like. He'd remarried 6 months after the divorce and moved to Europe with his new wife. Her mother had never truly moved on. She'd only occasionally dated, and then, in the summer when Julie had returned home briefly, her mother had told her that she'd been diagnosed with an aggressive breast cancer over a year earlier. She hadn't wanted to burden Julie with that knowledge. It had come as a shock to Julie. Her mother had succumbed to the disease a week after Julie had come home, almost as if she'd held on just long enough to see her daughter again. The funeral had been an intimate affair. Only a few local friends and colleagues had attended. After settling her mother's estate, Julie had returned to UCLA and buried herself in an intensive summer program in nanotechnology. It had taken her mind off her mother's death, but she still thought of her every day. Julie looked in the mirror again. She didn't look half bad in this, even though she'd never admit it to anybody. And although she might look pretty in this outfit, it didn't mean she felt comfortable in it. Or in her skin to begin with. When it came to boys, she'd always been shy. Sure, she'd dated boys in high school, and had even been on a few dates during her first 2 years of college, but whenever things got too intimate, she bowed out. She knew what other students were calling her behind her back, a cock tease. She didn't like the word, nor did she think it accurately reflected her character. She wasn't trying to lead anyone on, she was just, well, choosy. Yes, that was a better description. She was just waiting for the right guy. Someone with whom she could have a real connection. And so far, she hadn't met anybody who fit that picture. But maybe tonight she'd meet somebody who wasn't just a shallow guy eager to get laid. "What are you still looking in the mirror for?" Tanya said from the door. Julie turned around. "Just making sure. Making sure that you look gorgeous." Tanya smiled. No, it wasn't what she'd been thinking, but her housemate wouldn't understand that. So she lied instead. "Yep, just making sure it all fits." "Great," Tanya said. Belle, Michaela, Sandy, and Olive already left. Claire chipped her nails and has to redo them, but we're not waiting for her. And Emily. As usual, she's not ready. She's only just taking a shower. She'll follow us with Claire. Tanya was already heading down the stairs. Julie grabbed the tiny handbag Sandy had lent her and followed Tanya. She watched her new friend walk down the stairs, her curvy figure swaying from side to side. To be honest, she envied Tanya for her perfect figure. No wonder she was so popular with her fellow students. Tonight she was wearing a short red dress that was so tight that Julie wasn't sure how she'd manage to close the zipper. Her boobs were practically spilling out on top, yet Tanya walked as if the world belonged to her. Because it did. Well, if the world was a fraternity house. If only Julie had an ounce of her confidence. She sighed. In the foyer of the house, Tanya looked over her shoulder. "Everything okay?" "It's fine. I'm just a little nervous. I don't know anybody at that party." Tanya winked at her. "Not yet anyway." "Very funny. But what if nobody talks to me?" Her friend rolled her eyes. "In that dress? Trust me, every guy with eyes in his head will talk to you." "Easy for you to say. Trust me, I know these things. Now get your cell phone out. Let's show everybody how beautiful we look tonight." Julie took her cell phone out of her tiny bag and leaned close to Tanya, their heads touching, broad smiles beaming into the camera. Click. They both looked at the result. "Perfect," Tanya said approvingly. Quickly, Julie posted it to her Instagram account. "A night out with my roommates before classes start, #UCLA, #all dolled up, #party, on #student life, #blessed, #living the best life, #fraternity party." "I wish I was a little less shy, more like you," Julie said. Tanya opened the door and stepped outside. "You know there is a cure for shyness, right?" Julie stared at her, confused. Tanya smirked. "Comes in a bottle. Alcohol, dummy, and there'll be plenty of that where we're going. You'll loosen up, you'll see." "I hope you're right." Now one question remained. How much did she actually want to loosen up? Chapter 8. Desperately Seeking Julie. Los Angeles, Friday, September 26, 2025, 8:45 p.m. The sun had already set when Carter reached the address Kathleen had given him. He looked up at the 3-story mansion. All windows on the top 2 floors were dark, but there was light in a large room to the left from the entrance door. Since no curtains or blinds covered the window, Carter could see into the room. It appeared to be a large living room. He walked closer and listened, but heard no sounds coming from inside the house. He walked up the 3 steps to the front door and found the doorbell. When he pressed it, it chimed inside. He waited, but heard nothing, no doors opening or closing, no footsteps approaching the door or descending from the stairs. He rang the doorbell a second time, but nothing stirred. The house was empty. This wasn't good. He couldn't let another day pass without making contact with Julie. He needed to find her tonight. And to do that, he had to find out where she'd gone. Perhaps she'd left a clue behind in the house. Carter glanced back at the street. Several cars drove past, but the house was set back from the street, and the light that should have illuminated the porch and stairs to the house had either burned out or been switched off. Every so often, casting a look over his shoulder back at the street, Carter walked to the windows and tested them. All windows facing the street were locked. He left the porch and went around the house, checking on the windows on the side and back, and finally found one where he could push the sash window up and slide through the opening. He got back on his feet and saw that he was in a large eat-in kitchen. A very messy eat-in kitchen. His mother would have been appalled at the stacks of dirty dishes with half-eaten food piled up on every available surface. She would have called the repair service to fix the household robot responsible for cleaning, and given the manufacturer a piece of her mind while she was at it. Yeah, his mother didn't take shit from anybody, and particularly not from a robot. He left the kitchen and walked through the rooms on the first floor, careful not to make any noise in case somebody was home sleeping. The rooms on this floor were clearly communal space, and he found nothing that indicated where Julie and her housemates were. He walked up the creaking wooden staircase and noticed that there was a light on the landing of the second floor. On this floor, several doors led to bedrooms. And as luck would have it, each door had a sign glued to it indicating whose room it was. He found the door marked Julie's room and entered it. It was dark here too, but there was sufficient moonlight shining in from the window for him to see that Julie wasn't here. He looked outside. The room was overlooking the garden and couldn't be seen from the street. He felt safe enough to turn on the bedside lamp. The light source was sufficient for him to look around and search for anything that could indicate where Julie had gone. He noticed various items of clothing tossed on top of each other on a chair, as if she had tried on different outfits. There was a calendar on her desk, but no entries pertaining to tonight. Carter grumbled to himself. Think, man, think. Where does a 20-year-old girl go on a Friday night? Perhaps a girls' night out with her roommates. That would explain why nobody was home. And knowing what he knew about Julie, she would be documenting the evening with a selfie posted to her social media accounts. Carter pulled the sleeve of his linen shirt back and tapped on his holocom. He pulled up the file on Julie and scrolled to the information on her social media accounts. The last post on her Instagram account showed Julie and a black girl dressed up to the nines and smiling at the camera. The picture looked like it could have been taken in the foyer of the house. He read the caption. A night out with my roommates before classes start, #UCLA, #all dolled up, #party on, #student life, #blessed, #living the best life, #fraternity party. So not a night out just with the girls, but a fraternity party. Even better. It shouldn't be too hard to crash a fraternity party. Nobody would think he didn't belong. But which fraternity? Considering that classes at the university hadn't started yet, he guessed that pretty much every fraternity in town had a party tonight. He scrolled through the file again to find if Julie had mentioned any particular fraternity. It was quickest to enter a search that went through all files downloaded on his Holocom and flag those that mentioned a fraternity. It took only seconds for the results to appear in the hologram. There weren't too many. Clearly, Julie didn't know many students who were part of a fraternity, nor did she mention any fraternity in particular. There was only one result left. Carter clicked on it. It was a police report. He did a double take, but he hadn't made a mistake. Julie had filed a police report on the morning of Saturday, September 27, 2025. As he read on, his stomach turned and bile rose into his throat. Carter instantly knew why Julie had turned radio silent on her social media accounts. It was right in front of him. Julie Schneider had been raped at a fraternity party on the night of Friday, September 26, 2025. A student who was part of the fraternity, Todd Sterling, had slipped her Rohypnol, or a roofie as it was commonly known. Julie had reported that she only remembered having 2 drinks, one which she'd poured herself, and one Todd had given her. There were several photos of a bruised Julie, clearly taken at a hospital, and one photo of the perpetrator, which had been taken at a sports event at the university. Fuck. Carter looked at the time. He could only hope that he wasn't too late. He copied the fraternity's address on Gailey Avenue from the police report into his cell phone to find the fastest way there. Then he rushed out of the house. Chapter 9. It's a party, and I leave if I want to. Los Angeles, Friday, September 26, 2025, 9:20 p.m. Julie chided herself for having listened to her housemates. She should have never let them talk her into coming to this party. For starters, Belle, Michaela, Sandy, and Olive had barely spoken 2 words to her when she and Tanya had arrived. They'd already met up with some guys they knew and disappeared into the crowd. And moments after Tanya and Julie had gotten themselves a drink, Tanya had been dragged away by another friend. For a half hour, Julie just hung around the edges of the main room, sipping on her drink, the overly loud music making conversation virtually impossible. When the stragglers of her group, Emily and Claire, finally arrived a half hour later, she hoped to hang around them so she wouldn't look like she didn't belong. But it didn't take long for the 2 of them to be invited to dance. Suddenly, she stood there again like a wallflower. Apparently, just wearing a revealing dress to a party didn't automatically mean that guys found a girl appealing. Did she have "hapless virgin" written on her forehead? Or a mole on her face nobody had told her about? Or was it absolutely obvious that she didn't feel comfortable in this borrowed dress? This was a disaster. Julie took a last gulp of the alcoholic punch and turned to set the empty cup down somewhere. However, there was no ledge or side table or anything else where she could put the cup down. She couldn't very well drop it on the floor. She'd been raised better. Sighing, she walked back into the smaller adjacent room where the bar, which consisted of a large table with a massive punch bowl, an assortment of various liquor bottles, and a mishmash of plastic cups, stood. There she found a trash bin and dropped her empty cup in. It was quieter in here, and people were standing around talking. That's it for me, she thought, and pivoted to make her exit. Just then, the alcohol kicked in, and she swayed a little. Apparently the punch packed quite a well punch. Hi. She lifted her head and met the speaker's gaze. She almost choked on her own saliva. This was Todd Sterling, who played on the university's football team. To say he was popular was an understatement. Had he spoken to her? Most likely not. He didn't know her. Julie looked over her shoulder to see who he was greeting, but there was nobody behind her. Her face flushed crimson, if the heat suffusing her cheeks was anything to go by, and she turned back to look at him. "I'm Todd," he said with a wide smile. "I don't think we've met." It took her a moment to find her voice. "I'm Julie." Was that a frog in her throat? "Nice to meet you, Julie. Having fun at the party?" It was probably better not to say that she'd been about to leave. That would make her look lame. "Yeah, totally, it's great. The music, and yeah, great." She sounded like a moron. "Fabulous house," she added quickly to sound a little more intelligent. "Craftsman, right?" Now he was the one looking a little perplexed. Clearly, he had no idea about architecture. "Yeah, if you say so." Well, she'd done it. She'd made him regret having spoken to her. No wonder she didn't like to go to parties and talk to guys. It never turned out the way she wanted it to. "So," he started, "what's your major?" "You're at UCLA, right?" He winked. "Or did you crash the party?" "You can tell me. I won't kick you out." He laughed. "Yes, no, I didn't crash the party," she replied, all flustered. "I study nanotechnology at UCLA. Or actually, I'll go into that as my specialization once I've got all the regular technology classes out of the way. And then I'm hoping to do a master's at MIT. If I get in, that is." A look at Todd, and she realized he wasn't really interested in all that. He'd only asked to be polite. She had to save this before he walked away. "So, great games last season. I hope you're playing again this year," she said quickly. He grinned. "Yeah, I've got to. Football scholarship. So you watch the games, huh? Any player in particular you liked to look at?" Was he leaning in closer now? Heat rose up her nape. "The whole team is great. You guys won a lot of games, even against your arch-rivals, the Trojans. We're gonna make mincemeat out of them this season, you wait and see." Todd did have a high opinion of himself and the team, but maybe he was nervous too, and just wanted to keep the conversation going. She had to give him the benefit of the doubt. "I'd love to watch that," Julie said, though she'd never been too keen on watching football games. In fact, they bored her, but it seemed that all the cool guys were on the team. Or maybe they just appeared cool, because they were rather unapproachable. Todd suddenly motioned to her hand. "You don't have a drink." I'll get you one." "Punch?" he asked. "That'd be great." "Here, hold my beer while I get the punch." He pressed the cup of beer into her hand, and turned around. She watched him, or rather his broad back, as he grabbed a fresh cup and poured punch into it. Well, maybe this party wasn't so bad after all. Chapter 10. Animal House Rescue. Carter charged into the fraternity house on Gailey Avenue. It was loud, packed, and smelled of alcohol and marijuana. He knew the smell of marijuana well. It reminded him of visits to the doctor's office. In 2085, marijuana wasn't used as a recreational drug anymore. It was too valuable for that. Instead, more than 36 different medications had been formulated from the versatile plant, and many more were in the research and development stage. He couldn't understand why marijuana was still considered an illegal drug in many countries, including half the states in the U.S. To him, it was equivalent to an aspirin being considered illegal. Nobody in the house cast him a second look. Just as well. He made his way through the foyer into the crowded living room, frantically searching for Julie. What he would say to her, he had no idea. All that mattered was to get her away from this place. He didn't care if she thought he was an idiot or some drunk jerk. He wished he could have used his holocom to help him scan the room. It would have been faster, but he couldn't allow anybody to see his little toy from the future. Fuck. He was perspiring now, not from the run, but from the fact that he was afraid for Julie's safety. She wasn't in the living room. He pushed through the crowd and entered another room. He saw the bar that the students had set up. There he spotted Todd Sterling. He recognized him from the picture in the police report. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and handsome. Figured. He was scooping a reddish liquid into a cup, then put the ladle back in the large bowl, and reached into his front pants pocket, halfway pulling out a little plastic bag. From it, he fished a small white pill and dropped it into the drink. A moment later, he turned. In doing so, he revealed Julie, who was standing a few feet behind him, a drink in her hand. Carter pushed through the people crowding around the bar, not caring whom he pissed off. Todd had already reached Julie and handed her the drink with the roofie, while he took the other drink from her. Todd lifted his cup and touched it to Julie's. Another second, and Carter reached them. He snatched Julie's drink from her hand and tossed the liquid into Todd's face before either of them could react. Julie gasped in shock while Todd jumped back a step, arms wide, trying to avoid being doused. In the process, he seemed to have forgotten the beer in his hand and spilled it over a girl a few feet to his right. "Fucking asshole!" Todd yelled at Carter. "You're messing with the wrong guy." "Bastard," the girl Todd had spilled his beer on cursed. "Tell him that." Todd growled back, pointing at Carter. "That asshole started it. What the fuck's your problem, man?" He drove his finger into Carter's chest. But Carter didn't back away. Instead, he went toe-to-toe with the jerk. "My problem is that you put a roofie in that drink." He motioned to Julie. "You tried to drug her." There was a flicker of dread in Todd's eyes, but it was gone just as quickly as it had appeared. Julie's chin dropped. She gaped at Carter and then at Todd, shock registering on her face. "That's a fucking lie," Todd claimed, his voice loud so everybody in the room could hear him. "I did nothing of the sort. You're just some troublemaker crashing a party. My brothers and I are gonna kick your ass out of this house." Meanwhile, it had gotten rather quiet in the room, and everybody was staring at them. Only the people in the living room were unaware of the incident, and the music kept blaring in that part of the house. Carter looked at Julie. "He put a roofie in your drink. I can prove it. He's got a small plastic bag with more pills in the left front pocket of his jeans." "I don't." "That's another fucking lie. Get the fuck out of here. You don't belong here. Nobody invited you." While that was technically true, Carter wasn't budging. "If I'm such a liar, then why don't you empty out your pockets and show everybody what you're hiding?" By now, everybody in the bar area had stopped talking and was watching the altercation. "This is my place. You can't tell me what to do here. I'm not emptying my pockets." Julie took a step closer. "You won't have to empty your pockets." "See," Todd said, pointing at Julie. "Julie believes me." But Julie shook her head. "I didn't say that. I just said that you won't have to empty your pockets." She reached for Todd's breast pocket. "Because you're wearing the evidence." Carter followed her hand as she picked a partially dissolved white pill from the corner of Todd's breast pocket, where it had gotten caught when Carter had tossed the drink at him. Julie's lips quivered, but she didn't scream, nor did she cry. Outraged gasps came from the crowd around them. "You're the most despicable human being I've ever met," Julie said, then shoved what was left of the pill into Todd's mouth with her left hand and followed it up with her right fist. Todd's head snapped back. He hadn't seen this coming. Neither had Carter. Julie had guts. He liked that in a girl. "I think I'm done with this party," Julie said. "Did you come with somebody who can walk you home?" Carter asked. Julie glanced around. "My roommates." Carter took her elbow and steered her out of the room. "Let's find them." In the living room, the party was continuing. Nobody here had noticed the incident in the bar area. But Carter didn't doubt that within 15 minutes, the entire university would know what had occurred. He wanted to get Julie out of there before that happened. Julie turned to him. "Thank you. I don't even know what to say. If you hadn't been there, seen him, I don't know what would have happened." Carter knew, but he wasn't going to tell her. She didn't need any more trauma. "I was glad I was there at the right time. I'm Julie." She offered her hand and he shook it. "I'm Carter." She smiled at him now. "Thank you, Carter." Then she glanced around the room. "You know, it looks like my roommates are all having too much fun. I'll just go home on my own. It's not far." She was already heading to the foyer, and Carter accompanied her. "I don't want you to walk alone," he said. "Please let me walk you to your door to make sure that jerk and his friends don't follow you." She looked at him for a moment, contemplating the offer. Did she see him as a threat now? He was a man, he was a stranger. Why should she trust him? "Don't you want to stay at the party?" He shook his head. He'd only come to save her. But he couldn't tell her that, either. "I'd love it if you could walk me home. I'd feel a lot better." He smiled, and they left the house. Chapter 11. Walking in the moonlight. Outside, Julie could finally acknowledge the pain in her right hand. She let out a groan and shook her hand as if she could shake the pain away. "Damn, that hurt." "Let me have a look," Carter said and reached for her hand. She let him. His touch was gentle and careful, his hand warm and soothing. But what was even more important was that she liked it. She trusted him, although she didn't know why. Was it because he'd saved her from a potentially life-altering situation? And it would have been life-altering because there was only one reason why a guy would slip a girl a roofie. But she didn't want to think of that now. Carter had acted, and she was grateful for it. "Doesn't look like anything is broken," Carter said. "But I know how punching a guy can hurt. You might want to ice it down." It felt good, though. He chuckled. "Punching him? I would have liked to do that myself. But hey, ladies first." Julie looked at her rescuer. Carter was the quintessential heartthrob, tall and broad-shouldered, dark hair, classical face, and piercing green eyes. She'd always had a thing for guys with green eyes. To say that she was attracted to him was an understatement. Normally, when she was attracted to a man, she became all flustered and nervous. Not so with Carter. She felt at ease with him. While he looked like he was either a junior or a senior in college, something about the way he carried himself made him appear more grown up than an ordinary college student. Besides, nothing about him felt ordinary. "I needed to do it," she said into the brief silence between them. Carter nodded, and she saw in his eyes that he understood her. "Worth the pain in your hand, right?" "Totally worth it." Julie motioned in the direction of her home, and they started walking side by side. "I've never seen you on campus," Julie said. If she had, she would have noticed him. "I just arrived here." You're studying here at UCLA, right? When she nodded, he added, "What's your major?" Did he really want to know, or was he just making conversation like Todd? Oh God, how had she become so cynical in such a short time? It wasn't fair to measure Carter with the same yardstick as Todd. Engineering. What kind? She raised her eyebrows. Actually, nanotechnology. That's a great field. It'll change the world. Everything really comes down to improving nanotechnology and advancing the research. It has a big future. An amazing future, you'll see. She looked at him from the side, and he met her gaze. You sound so confident. Is that your field too? He laughed and shook his head. Only the brightest minds work on nanotechnology. I don't have the grades for that. Hearing him admit that she was smarter than he was refreshing. Most guys would never admit it. Or was he just acting humble? So, what are you studying? It's a little hard to explain, Carter said. Why? He sighed. 'Cause I'm not attending UCLA. Oh, you're taking a gap year. I wish I could do that, but I need to keep pushing and get my bachelor's as quickly as I can, and then do my master's. Perhaps a PhD. She shrugged. Did she sound like a total nerd? I admire that. You have great goals. You must have goals too, she fished. She'd never met a guy who didn't talk endlessly about himself whenever given the chance. Carter seemed different, more reserved, more private. Oh, I do. But they're nothing like yours. I just want to help my family. Sometimes that means you have to make sacrifices. Or whatever you thought would be a sacrifice. Sometimes doing something that's good for your family can also be good for yourself. This was a much more intimate confession than she'd expected from a guy like Carter. She guessed that his family didn't have the money to send him to a prestigious university like UCLA. Not wanting to make him feel embarrassed, she didn't probe any further. She'd been lucky in a way. Her mother had left a small life insurance that made it possible for her to continue her studies without drowning in student loans. Everything in life should be like that, shouldn't it? To want to do something that's good for everybody, Julie said. I hope that once I've finished my studies, I can apply my skills for the greater good, like inventing something that helps eradicate suffering or illness. So that it all means something. You will, Julie. You will do something great with your life. No matter how. Even if it's not how you envisioned it to be. She realized that they'd arrived at the house, and she motioned him to walk with her to the entrance door. This is me. This is where I live. Looks like a nice place. They stood there in front of the door, the distance of a couple feet between them. The lamp over the door wasn't working, but moonlight fell on Carter's face. He made no attempt to move any clausa. He'd done what he said he'd do, walk her home. Could she expect anything else? No. But it didn't stop her from hoping for something else, though she didn't know how to initiate it. For a few seconds, there was silence between them. She was searching for the right words. Do you think I could? He said hesitantly. Come in. See you again tomorrow, he finished his sentence, overlapping with her invitation. Suddenly flustered at having misread him, Julie felt her cheeks flush. Yes, I'd love to come in, Carter said. Tomorrow will be great, she said over his words. They both laughed. Okay, you first, Carter now said, grinning. Would you like to come inside? If that's what you want. You don't have to, I want to. That is if you want to. I don't want you to think you now have to take care of me, just because you saved me. You don't know me, you probably have a girlfriend. Carter took a step toward her, put his fingers under her chin, and tipped her head up so she had to look into his eyes. "I don't have a girlfriend. And I'd like to spend more time with you. But you might not be ready for this. Not after what happened tonight. I'm not like that guy. I don't push or force a woman into something she doesn't want, or at least doesn't want yet." His words gave her more confidence than she'd ever had before. She took his hand and turned her face into his palm, kissing it. Then she eliminated the remaining distance between them. "It feels right to be with you. You make me feel good." Slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she didn't want this, Carter dipped his head and slanted his lips over hers. His warm lips were gentle, hesitant at first, then firmer. He smelled good. Everything suddenly felt right. She knew now why she'd waited so long, why she'd not wanted to have sex with anybody before. Not because of religious or moral reasons like her fellow students suspected, but because she wanted to share this experience with the right guy. And the right guy was Carter, the stranger who'd saved her. She put her hand on his nape and parted her lips to show him that she was ready for his kiss and for so much more. Chapter 12. Close Encounter. Carter hadn't expected this turn of events, not after what had happened at the fraternity party. Julie should be circumspect of any man right now, particularly of a stranger. Yet she was still so trusting. He hadn't lied to her. He wanted to help his family, carry on the family's genes, not just for them, but for the greater good. But the sacrifice he'd expected to make for humanity's future wasn't a sacrifice at all. He liked Julie. She was bright, sweet, and unpretentious, and apparently totally unaware of the effect she had on him. It was a surprise to him, too. After all, Julie was a virgin and inexperienced, yet her inviting kiss sent heat charging through his veins, making him want to press her against the door and make love to her right there. Fuck, he cursed himself. Slow down. That's not how you treat a virgin. Not if you want her to invite you back. Julie's lips tasted sweet, and the way she pressed her body to his was more of a temptation than any experienced woman's wiles. Experience meant nothing. True desire, even in the absence of experience, was more of a turn-on than any practiced lap dance, striptease, or seduction. Julie moaned softly into his mouth, and he intensified the kiss, feeling how the virgin in his arms was awakening and blooming into a woman with desires and needs. He was glad that he was the one who would fulfill those needs for her, if only he managed to suppress his own need until he could show her that her pleasure mattered. That she mattered, more than she knew. Carter ripped his mouth from Julie's, but kept his arms around her, not wanting her to think he'd had enough. He couldn't help but notice that he was breathless. From just a kiss. He gazed at her lips. They looked almost swollen. Instinctively, he stroked his thumb over them. Was I too rough? Her cheeks flushed in a pretty red. She shook her head, then moved her face closer to his, offering her mouth once more. But he didn't respond to her invitation this time. Julie, I think we should get off the porch, or people will start talking about some stranger mauling you. She chuckled. We can't have that happening. The mauling? With a giggle she said, the talking. She dug into her handbag and found her house key. But when she tried to put it into the lock, the door creaked open. Carter realized immediately that he'd neglected to make sure the door had snapped in behind him in his haste to get to Julie. Julie cast a fearful look back at him. Break in. Let me check. He opened the door fully and stepped into the foyer, Julie right behind him. Stay here. I'll check all rooms. Julie nodded. Carter did a sweep of the first-floor rooms, the living area, dining room, kitchen and storage area, and the powder room. As expected, there was nobody. However, since anybody could have entered after he'd raced out of the house, he took his job seriously. Motioning to the staircase, he indicated to Julie that he would look upstairs too. A sweep of the second and third floor bedrooms and bathrooms revealed no intruder either. He went back downstairs. Julie still stood in the foyer, a can of mace in her hand. "You won't need that," Carter said, glad to see that she was prepared to defend herself. "The house is empty. Maybe one of your roommates forgot to lock the door on her way out." "You're probably right." Julie closed the entrance door, and it clicked shut. "See, it was a good idea of me to invite you in." He put one arm around her waist and pulled her to him. "So you're planning to use me, huh? Is that all I am to you, a bodyguard?" He swept a purposefully lusting look over her cleavage. "It's not the worst body I've ever guarded." She slapped him playfully and giggled. "Not the worst? You sure know how to get to a girl's heart." Carter laughed out loud, and a wide smile appeared on Julie's face, a smile that encompassed her eyes. He'd never laughed like this with any of the girls he'd dated. But with Julie, it was different. It felt as if he knew her, as if they'd been friends for a long time. Yet, it didn't take away from the excitement of knowing that they both wanted more than just that one kiss. "I have other ways up my sleeve if you want me to show you," he said, and let his hand slide down to her backside. Before she could answer, he added, "But only if you want to. If not, we can talk all night. It's your choice. It'll always be your choice. Because it had to be." If he had any chance at winning her trust and her affection in less than a week, he had to trust in her first, trust that she would make the right choice. She tilted her head to the side, contemplating something. "You're different from the other guys." "Which other guys? Are you telling me I'm not the first guy you've invited to your room?" "We're not in my room." She winked at him. "Yet." Then she stepped back and took his hand. He let her lead him to the stairs, and together they walked to the second floor. She opened the door to her room and entered, still holding his hand. Automatically, he shut the door behind him and pulled her into his arms. Moonlight streamed in from the window, but otherwise it was dark. "We should close the curtains," Julie suggested. "So you can have your way with me," Carter said. "So I can put the light on." Carter turned to the window and pulled the curtains shut. Julie switched on the bedside lamp. It provided just enough light to see everything he wanted to see. He looked at Julie. She appeared a little lost, as if she was suddenly getting cold feet. He went to her and tipped her chin up with his fingers. "May I promise you something?" he asked. "Promise me what?" "That I won't undress myself. You'll be the one to undress me, if that's what you want. Okay? But don't you want to? Don't think about what I want. Think about what you want, what you feel comfortable with. That's the first rule tonight. If there's a first rule, what's the second? You'll decide if and when to take off your clothes. If you want me to help you with that, you'll just have to ask." "Good." Julie put her hands on his chest and started undoing the buttons of his shirt. He took her hands, stilled them. "There's no rush, Julie. You don't have to prove anything to me." "I'm not doing this to prove anything to you. I'm doing it because I want to feel you. I've waited long enough. We only just met." She sighed. "I don't know whether you'll understand, but I always wondered if I would know when it was the right time, or whether I was just afraid of, you know." "Sex?" he asked with a smirk. "Yes, that. It turns out that I wasn't afraid of losing my virginity. But I was afraid of losing it to the wrong guy." She looked into his eyes. "It's the right time. And you're the right one." He hoped that she would still think the same once she found out where he was from and what his mission was. He wanted to tell her the truth. He wanted to come clean, But he knew what would happen if he did this tonight in the wake of Julie almost being drugged and raped by Todd. She would lose her trust in men completely and shut him out. He couldn't let that happen. He had to show her that he cared about her happiness, even if that meant hiding the truth from her tonight. "So you want me to take this shirt off," Carter said. "See, now you get it. You're not just a pretty face," Julie joked. He shook his head, laughing. Then he finished unbuttoning his shirt and shrugged it off, tossing it toward the chair. "Is that what you want?" He noticed her looking at his hairless chest, a look of approval in her eyes. "Can you help me with my dress?" she murmured, her voice sounding husky all of the sudden. He reached behind her with both hands and found the zipper. Inch by inch, he pulled it down with one hand, while he let his other hand glide onto her skin. He caressed her back. Julie closed her eyes and sighed. "Kiss me." She didn't have to tell him twice. Carter slanted his mouth over hers and kissed her. Julie didn't immediately put her arms around him. Instead, she brushed her dress's straps over her shoulders and let the dress slide down her body, pooling at her feet. Then she kicked off her high heels. He interrupted the kiss to look at her. She wore a white bra and panties, befitting a virgin, and sexier than any stripper. "God, you're beautiful," he whispered against her parted lips and lifted her into his arms. He carried her to the bed and laid her on top of the covers, then took off his shoes. He lay down next to her and pulled her into his arms. She molded her body to his and pressed her lips to his, inviting him in. He swept his tongue into her mouth and explored her. She wasn't timid, but participated with equal fervor. She put one hand on his nape and caressed him there. At the gentle touch, a shudder went through his body, and he let out a moan. He was glad he still wore his pants so he wouldn't just roll over her and bury himself in her. He was already rock hard and holding onto his control with everything he had. Slowly, gently, he began to explore Julie's body. Her skin was soft. She wasn't a curvy woman with big breasts, but rather an athletic one with a few subtle curves where it mattered. He slid one hand along the side of her torso, feeling her shiver at his touch. She moaned into his mouth, confirming that his caress was welcome. When his fingers reached the seam of her bra, he felt her pull in a deep breath. Slowly, giving her a chance to swat his hand away, he caressed her breast through the thin fabric. He rubbed his thumb over her nipple, eliciting a drawn-out moan from its owner. He repeated his action, then took her breast into the palm of his hand. Julie arched her back and thrust her breasts into his palm, demanding more. He squeezed her, first gently, then firmer. Julie didn't back away, didn't stop him. Instead, her hand moved from his nape down to his jeans-clad butt. Even through the thick fabric, Carter felt her dig her nails into him, forcing him to press his groin against hers. It only intensified his need to make love to her, but he wasn't ready to get naked, or it would be over far too quickly. He eased his lips from hers. "I'd like to touch your skin." He squeezed her breast again, telling her exactly where he wanted to touch her without any barrier. "Then open my bra and take it off me," she invited him. He fumbled in the front, but couldn't find the closure. "In the back," she whispered. "Sorry," he said. "Don't have too much practice in this." Which was true. Still, he felt like a fool not knowing that bras in 2025 had to be opened and closed in the back. By 2085, bra manufacturers run by all-women designers had completely reworked the bra to make it more comfortable and practical. Nevertheless, he was a quick learner. Seconds later, he'd freed Julie of her bra and gazed at the pretty sight. Her breasts, though small, were firm and beautiful. Carter dipped his head, eager to taste her firm nipples. When he put his lips around one hard bud and sucked it into his mouth, Julie gasped. He pulled back instantly, worried that his action had made her uncomfortable, when he felt her hand on the back of his head, guiding him back to her breasts. "Please," she murmured, her voice colored with need, "don't stop." Julie was responsive, despite her inexperience. She had the right instincts, and her desire matched his. Carter hadn't expected this when Dr. Mandel had told him he was being matched up with a virgin. He'd thought that the computer program that had been fed with every piece of information, including any available DNA data about the women who'd died during the pandemic of 2025, as well as the Romeos, had failed. But Carter had underestimated the scientists who'd developed the program. They had promised the Romeos that each and every one of them would be matched up with a woman who would be their best biological, physical, and psychological match, and practically guaranteed them that their attraction would be mutual. "I've only just gotten started," he said against Julie's soft skin. Chapter 13. Extremely Close Encounter. Julie felt the cool sheets beneath her and Carter's hot breath on her breasts. He seemed to be in no rush, but lavished her breasts with tenderness and unlimited patience, learning instinctively what she liked and how to drive her to want more. She had never thought that being intimate with a guy could make her feel as if she were a real-life goddess, and he the man who'd come to worship at her altar. Carter was treating her like a treasure he laid bare inch by inch. The few instances where she'd kissed a guy had always ended with an attempt at undressing her when she wasn't ready, and putting his hands where she wasn't welcoming them. She'd always felt that they didn't even care who she was or what she wanted, as long as they could, well, as long as they could get laid. And that had put her off, and made her push them away and decline any further dates. Carter seemed to be in no rush to seek his own satisfaction. Yet she heard his moans as he licked and sucked her breasts, as if he enjoyed it as much as she did. He was gentle, his hands and mouth caressing her without guile, without rushing to be inside her. It surprised her, because she wasn't unaware of the hard bulge in his pants. He was aroused. And she liked the feel of him, of his hard-on pressing against her. She rubbed herself against him, loving the way Carter responded, with a barely suppressed moan that sent ripples over her breasts, making her sensitive nipples even harder. She felt an overwhelming need to make Carter moan again, so she ground her groin rhythmically against him. She could feel the wetness in her panties, a signal from her body, telling her what she wanted, what she needed. Carter lifted his head from her breasts, his green eyes shimmering in all its facets. "Damn it, Julie," he whispered with a husky voice, "you're so damn hot. You're making me hot." She put her hand to his fly, but he captured it and stopped her from opening the button. "How about we start with you?" He let go of her hand and slid one finger along the top seam of her panties. Her breath hitched in anticipation. "Why don't you show me what you have in mind?" Carter held her gaze while he moved his hand beneath the fabric. Julie wet her lips, then felt one long finger slide down to her core where wetness seeped from her. When he touched her clit lightly, a bolt of excitement shot through her body, and she gasped. Carter smiled. "Ah, there it is. Perfect. Absolutely perfect." He captured her lips and explored her mouth with his tongue, more demanding now, while he caressed her clit with his fingers, first gathering moisture from her wet folds, then spreading it over her center of pleasure. She couldn't hold back her moans anymore, and surrendered to his touch. She needed this, wanted this. Impatiently, she tugged at her panties, pushing them down as much as she could. Finally, Carter helped her take them off completely, and she could open wider for him, allowing him to caress her with his expert fingers. "Oh God, please, yes." She didn't care that she sounded needy or slutty. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Carter was touching her, giving her pleasure, showing her what it meant to be a woman. Her hips moved in concert with his caresses, urging him to increase his tempo. He took his lips from hers. "I've got you, baby. I'll take care of you." His reassuring words made her desire him even more. "I want to feel you." "You will," he promised. "But first, I want to feel you shudder with pleasure, because once I'm inside you, I'm not sure I'll last long." He brushed his lips against hers. "You're too sexy. And I love caressing you. The way you respond turns me on." She didn't get a chance to respond because he kissed her again, and his fingers worked their magic. With every stroke, every touch, her arousal rose, and her body seemed to take on a life of its own. She moved in sync with Carter's caresses, forcing him to increase the intensity with which he stroked over her clit. All of a sudden, she couldn't breathe anymore. Her heart raced and waves rippled through her, one crashing against the next as she climaxed. Carter's fingers stilled, but remained on her clit to let her ride out her orgasm. She let out a long breath and looked at him. He gave her a warm smile. "Feeling all right?" Julie put her hand on his nape to pull his face to him. "Do you have to ask?" Carter shook his head. "I could feel you shudder with pleasure." She sighed contentedly. "I'm glad I went to the party, or I would have never met you." She put her lips to his and kissed him softly, before releasing him again. "Can you please do me a favor now?" He smiled. "I hope this is not the part where you toss me out." She chuckled. "You're not leaving anytime soon." "Good. So what's that favor?" "Take off your pants and make love to me." "So you haven't had enough for tonight then?" he asked with a smirk. "I'm only just getting started," Julie replied, using Carter's words from earlier. Chapter 14. Guy interrupted. Carter stood up and rid himself of his jeans and the briefs he wore underneath. When he turned back to Julie, her gaze dropped to his cock. Her eyes widened, and she sucked in a breath. By her look, Carter guessed that not only was Julie a virgin, she hadn't seen an erect cock in real life. He hoped that she wouldn't change her mind at the last minute, because he was so hard by now, it was almost painful. Not being able to find release in Julie's hot body would be a huge disappointment. And a failure on his part. But if she wasn't ready for his cock, he was prepared to continue to make her come with his hands and mouth until she was. He locked eyes with Julie, then put his hand around his cock and tugged on it once. Julie's lips parted and she licked them. He slid one knee on the bed to join her. "Julie, I just heard what happened at the party. Are you oh?" The voice was accompanied by the opening sound of the door, and stopped abruptly. Carter instinctively blocked Julie from view, and quickly glanced over his shoulder. At the door stood a black girl about the same age as Julie. "Tanya!" Julie shrieked, and scrambled to pull the duvet over her. Tanya had the decency to instantly whirl around facing the open door. "Sorry, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to make sure you're all right. Obviously you are." "Sorry again, sorry." She fled, pulling the door shut behind her without looking back. Carter looked at Julie. "Oh my God," she mumbled, mortified. "She's gonna tell everybody that we're." Her entire body looked flushed. Carter took the interruption in stride and shrugged. "Just as well. At least nobody else will barge in now." He lowered himself onto the sheets next to her, pulling her into his arms. "Where were we?" He brushed his lips over hers very lightly. "Now I remember. I was about to make love to you, as long as you still want to." She put her hand on his nape. "I do." At the invitation, Carter rolled over her, bracing himself on his knees and elbows, nudging her thighs apart. He adjusted himself, ready to plunge into her, when she put one hand on his chest, stopping him. "Condom," she said. He instantly remembered the lectures he'd attended, as part of the 1-week intensive training he'd undergone. In 2025, sexually transmitted diseases still ran rampant all over the world, and unwanted pregnancy was a problem. In 2051, HIV and other STDs had been cured. Healthcare was free all over the world, because world leaders had recognized that a healthy workforce was a productive workforce. And by the mid-2070s, there were no more unwanted pregnancies. If an unmarried young woman did get pregnant and wasn't prepared or willing to keep the baby, dozens, if not hundreds of families were lining up, offering vast amounts of money to adopt the baby. Abortion was virtually unheard of, and only performed when the life of the expectant mother was at risk. Carter had never worn a condom in his life, and he'd been unable to practice because no company in 2085 produced condoms, and the stock that was still available, from the late 2060s just before production of condoms had ceased, had deteriorated so badly that the thin latex had crumbled upon removal from its foil packets. Unfortunately, Carter had forgotten to purchase some upon his arrival in 2025. Carter hovered over Julie. "Fuck, I don't have any. I'm sorry, I guess I wasn't planning this." To his surprise, Julie smiled at him. "That's refreshing." "Being unprepared?" he asked, perplexed. "In a way. You're probably the only guy who's ever gone to a fraternity party without carrying a few condoms in his pocket." She kissed him softly on the lips, then she motioned to the bedside table. "Top drawer." "You're a lifesaver," Carter said, and reached for the drawer. Inside, there was indeed a small box of condoms. It was still in its original wrapping. For a few seconds, he struggled to remove the outer plastic before he could open the cardboard box and take out one foil packet. He turned away from Julie so she wouldn't see how inept he was at rolling the condom over his cock. And it turned out he was truly inept. He started rolling the condom over his erection when the damn thing ripped. "Fuck," he cursed. "What happened?" He looked over his shoulder. It broke. "Oh. Does that happen often to you?" "No, never before." And that was the truth. He pulled the remnants of the broken condom off his cock and reached for a second one. This time, he was a bit more careful and didn't force the uncomfortable latex all the way to the root of his erection. Maybe it wasn't meant to reach all the way up, but what did he know about condoms? "Got it." He turned back to her and saw an apprehensive look on her face. "I'll be as gentle as I can," he said, and brushed his knuckles over her cheek. "Because I'm a virgin." He shook his head. "Because I would never hurt you. You're too precious." Not only because Julie played an important part in saving the future, but because he was drawn to her in a way he'd never expected. Was it possible to fall for someone in only a few short hours? He'd always rejected that idea, finding it foolish and superficial. But now, he wasn't so sure anymore. Carter rolled over Julie, and she spread her thighs to make space for him. He braced himself on his knees and elbows, then dipped his head to hers and captured her lips in a deep kiss. She responded to him like before, with passion and fervor. She put her hands on him and ran them along his shoulders and chest, exploring him, while Carter adjusted himself and nudged against her sex. Her breath caught, but Carter couldn't stop now. He drove his cock into her in one quick thrust, knowing that this way the pain of her hymen tearing would be fleeting. Once inside her, he stilled and distracted her from the momentary discomfort by kissing her hungrily. It felt good to be inside her. Warm. Wet. Tight. Her interior muscles gripped his cock as if she were making a tight fist around him. He shivered at the sensation and broke the kiss. "You okay?" he whispered. She looked up at him. "Yeah. It's just a little new." He chuckled softly, then drew his hips back a few inches before slowly sliding back into her in one long movement. He watched her reaction and saw her lips part and a long breath escape from her throat. Then she drew an equally long breath back into her lungs. Her eyelashes fluttered. "You like that?" he asked and repeated the movement. "Oh, that's so good," she said, her voice raspy. "Good." He rocked back and forth in a slow tempo. He knew she would need some time to get used to him, used to his size, before he could thrust harder without hurting her. "Put your legs around me." She lifted her knees and crossed her ankles below his butt. "Like that?" "Yes, just like that." Carter shifted his angle so his pubic bone rubbed against Julie's clitoris whenever he plunged back into her sweet cave. Fuck, she was hot. Just looking at her, he was ready to come. But he kept a tight leash on himself. It was no mean feat to resist the draw Julie had on him. She didn't know it, but the way she moved, the way her body responded to him, was nothing anybody could learn. It was an instinct. She was perfect for him. Perfect in the way she moved in sync with him, perfect in the way their breaths quickened together, perfect in the way their heartbeats echoed each other. As he increased his tempo, she kept pace with him. She moaned in pleasure, sounds that became more frequent and louder as their lovemaking took on a new level. She grew into a woman in his arms, a woman full of desire, a woman who knew no limits. "Don't stop," Julie begged. "I'm not stopping," Carter assured her, and continued to thrust his erection as deep as he could. Her sex was dripping with her juices now, and every movement felt like diving into silk. He doubled his efforts and rode her harder, faster, deeper. "You like being fucked." Fuck, had those words just left his lips? Had he lost his mind speaking to Julie like this? To an innocent? "Yes," she let out with a moan, "fuck me harder." He wasn't sure he'd heard right. Harder. She grabbed him by his hips and pulled him toward her, so they slammed together even harder. He was afraid that he'd hurt her, but Julie arched her back and pressed her head into the pillow. He lost it right there and then. With his last ounce of control, he reached between their bodies and found Julie's clit. He rubbed his finger over it, while he thrust harder in and out of her. Julie let out a tiny breathless scream. A moment later, he felt her interior muscles spasm around his cock. Carter let go of the little control he still had, and allowed his orgasm to wash over him until he collapsed on top of Julie. He had just enough energy left to brace himself above her, so as not to crush her with his weight. "Fuck," he let out, that was unbelievable. She cupped his cheek, and he turned his face into her palm and kissed it. "So I did everything right?" she asked. When he looked at her, he noticed her smiling. "As you full well know, you little tease. This was perfect. You are perfect." She pulled his head to hers. "Can we do it again?" Carter laughed at her eagerness. "I created a monster." "So that's a no then?" He shook his head. "It's a yes. Just give me 30 minutes to recover, and you can have your way with me again." Then he captured her lips and only released them when they were both breathless. Chapter 15. The morning after. Los Angeles, Saturday, September 27, 2025. Seeing the rays of the sun stream in although the curtains were drawn, Julie snuggled closer to the warm male body in her bed. She wasn't dreaming. No, it had really happened. Carter had made love to her, several times in fact. And it had been everything she'd hoped for, and more. He'd been tender and passionate at the same time. As well as considerate. She'd learned more about her own body in one night than in the 20 years prior. It had been worth waiting, and not losing her virginity to just anybody. Julie couldn't remember when she'd finally fallen asleep, her entire body relaxed and boneless. Carter had pulled her into his arms and she'd molded herself into the curve of his body, loving the feel of him spooning her engulfing her in a protective cocoon. She wanted every night to be like this, even though she had no idea how she would ever get any studying done if he spent every night with her. Oh Julie, she scolded herself softly, you shouldn't get ahead of yourself. Who knows if he even wants to spend that much time with you? Julie inhaled Carter's scent and sighed contentedly. So you're awake then, Carter murmured softly in her ear. She turned in his arms to look at him. I didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. I've been up for a while. Was this where he told her that he had to leave, and couldn't commit to when she'd see him again? She dreaded that moment. You're an early riser, she said, deflecting from her worries. You call 10 a.m. early. He chuckled. Julie shot up to sit. What? 10 a.m.? Her gaze shot to the clock on her nightstand. Carter was right, it was past 10 a.m. Jesus, I can't believe I slept that long. I never sleep in. It's Saturday, Carter said and pulled her down to him. He gave her a charming grin, and his eyes sparkled with mischief. May I introduce you to my favorite morning activity? He pressed her to him, so she could feel his hard-on. Heat suffused her cheeks. Carter still wanted her, and showed no signs of wanting to leave her bed. How about I'll continue being your tutor and teach you how to ride me? He coaxed, pulling her on top of him. Oh fuck, she cursed, Carter's words having triggered her memory. I've got an 11 o'clock appointment with one of my professors. And she couldn't blow it off, because she needed a glowing recommendation letter from Professor Seymour to get into MIT. Can't you just postpone it? She let out a sigh of regret. Unfortunately not. It won't take long though. Probably about an hour, and then I have to go to the bookstore to pick up the books I ordered. Suddenly even more things from her to-do list came to mind. Oh crap. And then I need to get my computer fixed, and they close at 3 today, and they won't be open tomorrow, and I need it on Monday or... If I were an insecure guy, I'd think you're trying to get rid of me. He paused for a quick second. Are you? Julie smiled and bent down to kiss him. I'm not. How about we meet up after I'm done with my errands? At the little coffee shop on the corner of Glendon and Kinross. Do you know it? He smiled. You swear you're not just gonna ghost me? She laughed and rubbed herself against his cock. And miss out on this? Not a chance. Good. I'll go back to my place and take a shower. Meet you there at, let's say, 4. Perfect. The moment Carter got dressed and left her room, Julie jumped into the shower and got ready. She rushed to get to her appointment with Professor Seymour, and made it with 2 minutes to spare. Just like she'd hoped, Professor Seymour had been impressed with her paper on nanotechnology, which she'd handed in as her final assignment for the class he'd taught during the summer semester. He was more than willing to give her a glowing recommendation for her application to MIT. Knowing that he had taught there a few years earlier before moving to the West Coast for family reasons, his words would weigh heavily in her favor. She wanted to hug him for it, but didn't, and instead thanked him and shook his hand enthusiastically. The campus bookstore was busy. Everybody was picking up their books for the coming semester. Julie got in line. She didn't mind the wait. It gave her time to daydream about her night with Carter. She still felt a tingling sensation between her thighs when she thought of his touch. Hey Julie, what a shocker about what happened last night, right? Startled, Julie turned her head to the voice. Sandy, one of her roommates, stood next to her. Oh, morning, Sandy. Julie felt flushed, though she knew that Sandy couldn't possibly know what she'd been interrupting with her words. You mean at the fraternity party? Yeah, Todd's an ass. He deserved it. Sandy shook her head. No, Not about that, though. Yeah, he's a total jerk, and now finally everybody knows it. Spread like wildfire last night. But that's not what I was talking about. Julie froze. Had Tanya told the entire house that she'd walked in on her and Carter? Oh God, how embarrassing. Haven't you heard? Sandy continued. Somebody broke into the house last night when we were at the party. It clicked immediately. The open door when she and Carter had arrived at the house after leaving the party early. She was about to mention it to Sandy, but her roommate continued to talk a mile a minute. But we're gonna get him. It's on camera. On camera. There's no security system at the house. Sandy leaned in. You probably don't know this, but Emily is really particular about her stuff, and she always blames one of us for taking her makeup or borrowing her clothes or whatever, you know. Totally paranoid. Turns out whenever she leaves the house, she points her second laptop toward the open door and uses some motion sensor app on it to switch on and record when somebody enters her room, so she can catch one of us in the act. Right. Well, she caught somebody, but it wasn't one of us. She's gonna go to the police later. Julie's heart beat faster. Thank God Carter had been with her last night, and had made sure the burglar had left. Wow. Was anything stolen? Sandy shrugged. Not sure yet. When I left the house, half of them were still sleeping. I guess not everybody has heard about it. You should check your stuff, make sure your computer is still there. Doesn't look like he took anything from the living room. TV's still there. Julie pointed to her bag, which held her laptop, since she was going straight to the repair shop from the bookstore. Got my computer, and it didn't look like anything was disturbed in my room. That's good. Next, the clerk suddenly called, and Julie realized it was her turn. Talk later, okay? Julie said to Sandy and went up to the clerk, handing him her order slip. Chapter 16. Betrayed. The computer repair shop wasn't as busy as Julie had expected. To her surprise, the problem she'd encountered with her laptop turned out to be an easy fix, one that the technician was able to do on the spot. By the time she walked out of the repair shop, it was only 2 p.m. She could have met up with Carter earlier than 4 p.m., but for some reason, she'd never thought of asking him for his cell phone number. Really dumb. She decided to walk back home so she could deposit her laptop in her room and maybe have a quick snack. All the sex the night before had made her hungry, and she hadn't had time to grab anything earlier. When she entered the house, Emily was coming down the stairs from the second floor, her handbag slung diagonally across her body, her cell phone in her hand. Hey Emily, Julie said. Emily met her eyes. Did you hear? She pointed to her cell phone. Yeah, I ran into Sandy at the bookstore. I'm on my way to the police to make a report. Wanna come? Julie looked at her watch. Wish I could, but I'm meeting somebody in a little while. I don't want to be late. No worries. Emily shrugged. But you've got to see this. Julie took a step closer, and Emily queued up the video on her phone. It's recorded from the moment the burglar passed by my room. Julie looked at the video. It was dark, but of good quality. See here, he doesn't even look into my room, and then he opens the door to yours and goes in. Julie watched as the tall man walked into her room, which was directly opposite of Emily's. He left the door open, and with Emily's door also being open, the computer had continued recording the intruder's movements. In Julie's room, he switched on the bedside lamp and rummaged through her things. Julie felt violated. How dare he? What the fuck was he looking for? She hissed and looked closer, but the man's face was still hidden by the darkness. The light of the bedside lamp wasn't sufficient. And for most of the video, he had his back turned to the camera. At some point there seemed to be a second light source behind the stranger, while he sat down on the bed, his back to the door. But Julie couldn't make out what it was. Maybe a flashlight. Then suddenly he turned, and for a short moment the bedside lamp illuminated his face. "There, we've got him," Emily said triumphantly, just before the intruder charged out of the room and closed the door behind him. "I'm sure the police can run this through some facial recognition system or something, right? I mean, you're the techie here." But Julie couldn't speak. She felt paralyzed. "Yeah, I'm furious too," Emily said, seeing her shocked face. "And he didn't even go into my room." "Yes," Julie said, her voice weak and scratchy. She'd recognized the intruder. It was Carter. For a moment, she tried to make sense of his actions. She knew he'd gone upstairs to look for an intruder when he and Julie had found the front door open. Was that what the video was about? Carter checking if anybody was there? "Can you go back a few seconds?" "Sure." Emily went back, then resumed the video. That's when Julie saw what she was looking for, the timestamp. Carter had left her room at 9:02 p.m., when Julie had been at the party, well before he'd rescued her from Todd. Rescued? Was that really what he'd done? Or had all this been some elaborate plan he'd concocted to get close to her? It had to be. Carter had set her up, manipulated her, and gotten her into bed. Julie pushed back the tears until she reached the privacy of her room, but when the door shut behind her, she couldn't hold them back any longer. Carter had deceived her. Chapter 17. You Can Handle the Truth. Carter took a seat at an empty table outside the coffee shop Julie had asked him to meet her. He was early, not wanting Julie to arrive before him and think that he'd stood her up. He barely touched the iced coffee he'd ordered. The coffee shop's practices had surprised him. Everybody's drink was served in a single-use paper cup, and he'd personally seen that upon finishing their drinks, the customers disposed of the paper cups in a garbage bin. Did they not have any idea how valuable paper was? After the great fires in the Amazon rainforest in the early 2040s and the uncontrolled logging operations in countries like Canada and the United States, trees had become scarce, and it had taken a global effort to restore forests. Logging was now tightly controlled, and paper cups or plates and anything similar had been banned. Carter sighed. He was nervous. He only had 2.5 days left to tell Julie who he really was and where he was from, and to convince her to travel to the future with him. In his head, he listed the points in his favor. 1. He'd saved Julie from Todd, the jerk who would have raped her according to the historical records. Even though Julie didn't know about her fate, she knew he'd saved her from somebody who'd had bad intentions. Carter had no intention of telling her about the police report. Why put her through the trauma when it wasn't necessary? It was sufficient for her to know that Todd had tried to drug her, and that Carter had intervened just in time. 2. He had spent a blissful night in bed with Julie, showing her the pleasures possible when a couple clicked on all levels. He'd been gentle with her and put her needs ahead of his. Though, to tell the truth, he'd gotten just as much pleasure from their lovemaking as she had, if not more. Seeing her surrender to her desires had given him as much satisfaction as his own orgasms. 3. He and Julie had things in common. She was interested in nanotechnology, a field that was highly advanced in 2085, and while he hadn't studied it himself, his own studies in the field of climate and environmental science were linked to hers. In fact, they depended on each other. Knowing that he and Julie would one day be working in related fields was appealing. They would have things to talk about other than sex. And he knew, though not from his own experience but that of his parents, that a couple needed more than just physical attraction to grow old together. Funny, he just realized that he was thinking of a future with Julie, even though the mission didn't demand it. All his mission required was to convince the woman to return with her time-traveling Romeo. Once in 2085, the woman was free to choose her partner. This had been made clear to the Romeos during their training, although the software that had matched the men from 2085 to the women of 2025 was giving the matched couple the best chance of compatibility. He and Julie had chemistry. It was undeniable, but he wasn't blind to the big points that stood in the negative column. He was a stranger, one who'd met her under a pretext. Time travel was a concept that the scientists in 2025 hadn't even attempted to explore beyond the hypothesis of the bending of space-time. Julie would have a hard time believing that he'd come from the future. But even if she believed it, there was still the hurdle of convincing her to come with him, leaving her entire life behind. This he considered the biggest hurdle, but one he had to clear within the next 2.5 days, or he would fail in his mission. And Julie would die. A shadow suddenly fell over his table, and he looked up. Julie stood in front of him. He jumped up, ready to kiss her, but she put her hand against his chest and stopped him. Only now he noticed her facial expression. She appeared upset. "Julie, are you okay?" "No, I'm not okay." "Come sit down, tell me what's wrong," he said, pulling out a chair for her. But she kept standing, as did he. "I'm not staying long," she said, her tone clipped. He was no idiot. She was angry with him, but he had no idea why. "Julie baby, what's?" "You have no right to call me that." He shoved a nervous hand through his hair. "Please, Julie, what is it?" "It's you," she accused him. "You broke into the house last night." His heart stopped. How the hell did she know? Had somebody seen him after all? He stopped himself. He was unprepared and had no answer ready. "Don't deny it. My roommate has a video of you going into my room, rummaging through my things." "Shit. And before you say it was when I had you check the house for an intruder, there's a timestamp on the video. It was taken while I was still at the party." "Julie, please, I can explain." "Explain? You tricked me. How did you do it? Did you see Todd trying to pick me up, and figured you'd plant some drugs on him so you could play the hero?" Her voice became louder with every word. Carter glanced around, and a few people were already staring at them. "I didn't, I swear. Let's go somewhere where we can talk in private." "Do you think I'm stupid?" "I'm not going anywhere with you even if my life depended on it," she hissed. "Fuck. What now?" "Julie," he said in a low voice and leaned in, hoping the people at the table next to them couldn't hear him. "I've come from the year 2085 to save you. Next week, a virus will sweep through the West Coast, and you'll be one of the first infected." "You lying bastard," she interrupted him. "You think you can serve up some fantastical story. God damn it, that's so low. You're a piece of shit." "I can prove it," he said, desperate now. He shoved his left sleeve up and turned a little to block the other customer's views as much as he could. Then he tapped on his wrist. "Here, this is," he stopped himself. He wasn't wearing his holocom. He'd taken it off in the motel to take a shower, then forgotten to put it back on. It was an easy thing to forget, given that back home he would have never needed to take it off in the first place. Shit. Julie glared at him. "Don't ever contact me again." She spun around and hurried away. Fuck, he cursed. There was no use running after her now. Without his holocom, he had no proof that he wasn't lying. He had to get back to his motel, get the holocom, and then mend things with Julie. Chapter 18. Ambushed. Carter unlocked the door and rushed into his motel room. He hurried into the bathroom and looked around. Where the hell was his holocom? He went through the steps he'd taken before his shower. First, he'd undressed in the bedroom, then walked into the bathroom and reached for the towel when he'd realized that he still wore his holocom. Carter turned around to the little shelf where extra toilet paper was kept. His holocom lay on top of one of the rolls where he'd placed it so it wouldn't get wet. He snatched it, put it around his wrist, and watched as it molded itself to it, taking on the skin's characteristics, thus turning itself invisible. At a sound in the bedroom, Carter spun around and stepped back into the bedroom. He wasn't alone anymore. In his haste, he'd neglected to close the door behind him. Shit. Todd Sterling hadn't come alone. He'd brought a friend who was a little taller and a little bulkier than the would-be rapist. And neither of the two looked in the least bit friendly. They'd followed him, and he hadn't noticed it, too preoccupied about his confrontation with Julie. "Get the fuck out of my place," Carter growled. It was clear that the two couldn't be intimidated. They'd come spoiling for a fight. "Sure we will," Todd said. "After we've given you what you deserve for what you did." He motioned to his friend. Steve shut the door. Steve did as he was told. Carter knew what it meant. But he wasn't one to be intimidated easily, either. "What I did? That's rich, coming from the guy who was planning to rape Julie." Todd sneered. "Trust me, she wanted it. Real bad." He glared menacingly. "But then you, asshole, had to come along and spoil the fun." Both Todd and Steve approached side by side, leaving Carter no way of escape. "Now, we're gonna have a little fun, and when we're done with you, it's Julie's turn." Todd grabbed his crotch. "I'll show her what she's missing." "Don't you touch Julie, or I'll kill you." Furious, Carter lunged at Todd and tackled him to the ground so fast that the jerk didn't have time to react. Carter landed one heavy fist, whipping Todd's head to the side, before Steve joined in the fight. He'd expected as much, knowing that guys like Todd didn't do their dirty work on their own. They always needed a sidekick. And Steve was the kick-in sidekick. He pried Carter off Todd and immediately slammed him against the small desk in the bedroom. The hard edge of the wood hit Carter in the kidneys, sending a shockwave of pain through his lower body. But knowing that Julie was in danger, he ignored the pain. He used the desk behind him for leverage and kicked Steve in his midsection, making him slam against the wall and groan in response. But Carter couldn't rest, because Todd had scrambled to his feet and now dealt heavy blows, first hitting Carter in the stomach, then following up with several punches to the face. Pain radiated through Carter's body, but he fought back, landing one heavy blow beneath Todd's chin, before being kicked in the ribs by Steve. Now both guys kicked and punched him. Carter held them off as best he could, but he only had one pair of hands and barely got a blow in edgewise, while the two fraternity jerks worked in tandem. One of Todd's kicks sent Carter to the floor, and once down, he had no way of getting back up. "That's for ruining my reputation," Todd snarled and kicked Carter in the stomach. Carter curled up, but the kicks kept coming. "That'll teach you," Todd said triumphantly. Another vicious kick, and Carter's head hit a leg of the desk behind him. He fought the blackness that suddenly wrapped around him, but lost. They'd knocked him out. Chapter 19. Home alone. Julie lay on her bed and stared into nothing. She'd cried when she'd gotten back to the privacy of her own room. Luckily, none of the other girls had seen her come back. They all seemed otherwise occupied. She heard the sound of several showers, of hairdryers being operated, and of high heels clicking on the old wooden floors. At a knock on her door, Julie shot up. "What?" The door opened, and Belle, a beautiful redhead making her name proud, popped her head in. "Hey Julie, can I borrow your hair dryer? Mine just died on me." "Sure." She pointed toward her bathroom. "It's in my bathroom, bottom shelf." Belle hurried inside and was back a couple of seconds later, hair dryer in hand. "Thanks. You're a lifesaver." She was already at the door when she stopped and looked at Julie. "Are you wearing that to the restaurant? It's pretty fancy, from what Michaela told me. Her dad is springing for it. You only turned 21 once, right?" Julie hadn't forgotten that it was Michaela's birthday, and that a limo hired by her father would pick them all up to take them to an expensive restaurant in Malibu. But she wasn't in the mood to join them. She wasn't in the mood to laugh and smile and celebrate when inside she felt crushed, disappointed, and hurt. "I'm not going," Julie said. "I'm probably coming down with something." "Oh no." Belle sounded truly disappointed. "I hope it's not that virus that they reported about on TV. There are already a few outbreaks on a cruise ship that docked in Long Beach." Julie hadn't heard of any virus, but then she hadn't watched TV in a few days. Besides, she knew she wasn't coming down with anything other than a broken heart. "I'm sure it'll be fine if I just get a good night's sleep." She forced a smile. "You guys have fun though." "Okay then. Hope you feel better soon," Belle said and left the room. 20 minutes later, Julie heard the limousine pull up in the driveway, and 15 minutes after that, even the stragglers had left the house. She was alone. Alone with her thoughts and her broken heart. How could she have been so wrong about Carter? He'd played the considerate lover and she'd fallen for it, hook, line, and sinker. Like a naive country bumpkin. She hated him for that, for pretending he was a good guy, when in reality he wasn't any better than Todd. The doorbell suddenly penetrated her thoughts. She contemplated not answering, but when it rang a second time, she wondered if one of her roommates was expecting a delivery somebody needed to sign for. She stood up and walked to the door, glancing in the mirror quickly. At least her eyes didn't look that puffy anymore. She left her room and walked downstairs. When she opened the door, she realized that it had already gotten dark. The porch light had a new bulb in it and illuminated a young man, but he didn't bring any packages. Julie knew she'd seen him somewhere before, maybe on campus. "Yes?" she asked. "You don't know me, but I was at the fraternity party last night and I saw what happened," he started. "Yeah, She pulled the door closer to her, ready to close it. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude." He smiled. "It's just, what happened to you happened to my sister too, and I think if you came forward, maybe we could nail him." He motioned to the hallway behind her. "Can we talk?" She hesitated. She didn't know this guy, and she was alone in the house. "It's not a good time right now," she said. Of course, he said quickly. "You probably have plans. I should go. Maybe I can call you to talk about this?" She nodded. "I think that would be better." He pulled his cell phone from his back pocket. "So, what's your number?" She relaxed and started to recite it. "Okay, got it," he said, and turned the phone so she could see what he'd typed. "Oh, you got the last two numbers mixed up," she said and reached for his phone. "Let me correct it." Holding the phone with one hand and typing the correct number with the other, she looked down at the screen when the guy pushed the door fully open, and a second man who seemed to come out of nowhere lunged at her, lifting her off her feet. She recognized him immediately. It was Todd. She screamed, but Todd's friend had already shut the front door and was helping Todd drag her up the stairs. "You little bitch. Now you're gonna pay for embarrassing me at my own party," Todd growled. Julie kicked and screamed. "Let go of me. Help. Somebody help me." "Steve, shut her up," Todd ordered, and his friend complied and slammed his big hand over Julie's mouth, muffling her protests. It didn't take much for them to drag her upstairs to her room. They tossed her on the bed, but fear gave her strength, and she immediately kicked Todd and shoved him back. But Steve was holding her down now. Todd approached and unbuckled his belt. Fury was written on his face. "Help!" she screamed again while trying to twist out of Steve's grip, but he was too strong. "Somebody help me." "She's quite a wildcat," Steve commented. "I think I'll have a go too once you're done." Panic, fear, and desperation collided in her. They would rape her violently, and then? Would they let her live? A chill went up her spine. She couldn't let them succeed. Todd had already opened his zipper and was now sliding his pants down to his knees. His boxers followed. Julie kicked, but Steve snatched one of her legs and twisted it. In pain, she screamed out. Then Steve leaned sideways over her torso, trapping her arms and holding her body down, while Todd opened Julie's pants and stripped them off of her. "No," she screamed. "Stop. Don't do this. Please." But there was no use pleading with them. Tears shot to her eyes. A sob escaped her throat. She felt Todd's hand on her panties, ready to pull them off, when he suddenly screamed in pain and let go of her. Steve was still partially blocking her view, but he'd turned his head to see what was wrong with Todd, loosening his grip in the process. She took full advantage of it and worked her right arm free. She punched Steve in the neck and he let go of her, rearing back. That's when she saw that somebody had come to her rescue, Carter. On the floor, Todd lay on his stomach, his bare ass bloody from a deep knife wound. He was whimpering in pain. Carter stood over him, holding the bloody knife. His face was bloodied and swollen. It looked fresh, but not from seconds earlier. He'd had a fight with somebody in the last couple of hours, and it wasn't hard to guess with whom. When Steve made a move toward him, Carter pointed the knife in Steve's direction. "If you want to end up like your friend, go ahead and come closer," Carter taunted him. "Just a warning, my grandfather was a butcher." Steve tossed him a worried glance, then lifted his hands and made a wide berth around Carter and Todd. "I've got nothing to do with this." It was all Todd. Julie jumped up. "All Todd? You were planning to rape me the moment Todd was done." She spit in his face. Steve reached out toward her, perhaps to slap her out of anger, but Carter was faster. His knife sliced into Steve's forearm. Steve screamed in pain while blood dripped onto the floor. "You touch her, you'll wish you were dead." Carter glared at Steve, and in that instant Julie realized that Carter would do anything to protect her. Even after the things she'd said to him. "Now grab your fucking friend and leave, or I'll toss you both down the stairs." Steve hurried to give his friend a hand to get up. Todd leaned on him, but moaned with every step. Carter followed them, and Julie heard them walk downstairs. Moments later, the front door closed. She heard Carter walk up the stairs again a few seconds later. He appeared in the door and stood there. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head. "No." She walked toward him, unconcerned about being half naked. "How did you know what they were planning?" He pointed to his face. "They followed me to my place and beat the living crap out of me. I knew they were coming for you next." He breathed heavily. "I blacked out. I don't know for how long. I was scared I'd be too late." She closed the remaining distance between them and put her hand on his cheek. He winced, so she removed it quickly. "They must have waited until my roommates left for Michaela's birthday party. They arrived only a few minutes after everybody was gone." She wanted to hug him, but she didn't dare, not knowing what injuries he had. "I don't know how to thank you." "I do," Carter said. "Please listen to me for half an hour, so I can explain who I am and why I'm here." She nodded. She owed him that. But first, let me take care of your wounds. Chapter 20. The Holocom. After ministering to Carter's injuries, cleaning the encrusted blood from his face and hands, and giving him painkillers, Julie sighed. His handsome face still looked worse for wear and would need a few days to heal, but luckily the kicking he'd received from Todd and Steve hadn't resulted in any broken bones. Bruises were another matter. She'd lifted his shirt over his head to examine him and realized how viciously he'd been beaten. Yet he'd raced to get to her to save her, ignoring his own pain. "Thank you," Carter said. "You're a pretty good nurse." She shook her head. "You should probably go to the hospital. Have them check you out properly, just in case you have a concussion." "I can't afford to go to the hospital." "You have no health insurance? You could go to Student Health Services. They'll take." He took her hand and shook his head. "Like I told you last night, I'm not a student. Not here anyway." "Then where?" "Not where when?" Confused, she asked, "What do you mean by that?" "You might want to sit down for this." Carter took a deep breath. He sat on the edge of the bed, while Julie put away her first aid kit. Her heart began to beat faster. The serious tone of his voice was starting to alarm her. She pulled a chair up to face him and sat down. "I'm sitting. My name is Carter Ambrose, and I was born in 2065. He made a pause while she tried to make sense of the words. "That's not possible. After all, 2065 lay in the future, not the past. I'm 20 years old. I traveled here from the year 2085. I'm from the future, Julie. I was sent here for you." She shook her head automatically. No, that's nonsense. You can't be from the future. That would mean you time traveled. That's impossible. That kind of technology doesn't exist." "No, it doesn't," he confirmed, "not in 2025. But it does in 2085. I can prove it." He tapped on his wrist, and all of a sudden, a kind of hologram appeared floating over his arm. Julie choked on her own saliva and jumped up. Her sudden movement caused her chair to fall backward, and she almost lost her footing. Carter rose too, though his face contorted in pain when he did so. "Please, Julie, I won't hurt you. You promised me a half hour to explain everything. Please." Her heart beat into her throat, but she nodded. "Okay, half an hour." He sat back down and patted the spot next to him. "Please sit here, so you can see what I want to show you on my holocom." Holocom. This device? In 2085, everybody over the age of 5 has one. It's our version of a smartphone, though it's so much more. It monitors my vitals and alerts me to any medical problems. It has hundreds if not thousands of functions. Hesitantly, she sat down next to him and looked at the projection hovering above his arm. "It's a hologram," she said, and leaned in to see more details. "But it's way more advanced than any I've ever seen. The details, the clarity." She was studying technology like this, and she recognized that what Carter was showing her didn't exist. Not in 2025. "Nanotechnology has come a long way," Carter said. She pointed to his wrist. "But you weren't wearing anything, no watch, nothing." Even when she looked at his wrist now, she couldn't make out anything that could hide a device like this. An implant? No. He tapped his wrist again, and the projection disappeared. Then he gripped his wrist with his other hand and pulled it away a moment later. He was now holding a gold-colored slim wristband, no larger than a watch. "But I couldn't see anything on your skin." Nor had she felt anything when she'd tended to the cuts and bruises on his hands and arms. "Because it takes on the wearer's properties." "May I?" He pointed to her wrist. She nodded and stretched out her arm. Gently, Carter placed the device around her wrist. A second later, the device had blended with her skin, making it invisible. She touched the spot, but she felt nothing. She tapped on it, but the hologram didn't open up. "It's not working," she said. "It's genetically coded. It only works on its owner, or when it's connected to a master cradle, like when it needs to be upgraded, or if maintenance needs to be performed." He reached for her wrist again and took the device from it, then placed it back on his own wrist and tapped it again. Just like before, a hologram appeared and hovered over his arm. "Are you with me so far?" he asked and looked into her eyes. She had to admit that the technology was compelling and seemed to support his claims. "So far, yes. But time travel? I don't know. It seemed too fantastical. Could technology really have advanced that far in 60 years that time travel was possible? I know it's a hard concept to grasp, but you know yourself that ever since Albert Einstein published his theory of relativity in 1905, scientists have played with the idea that time could be bent." "True, but nobody has gotten very far to create any practical applications from this theory," she replied. He smiled. "Again, not by 2025. But our scientists made it possible. And that brings me to why I'm here. Why I came to find you." She waited with bated breath, her pulse racing. In 2025, a virus is spreading around the world. It comes from the South American continent. The first Americans have already been infected. Their cruise ship already docked in Long Beach. Julie let out a tiny breath. She remembered what Belle had mentioned. The cruise ship. But I thought that was just the usual outbreaks they get on cruise ships, you know, like the norovirus, when everybody pukes their guts out. Carter shook his head. "I'm afraid it wasn't the norovirus. It's something nobody has seen before. The virus will kill millions all over the world, and those who survive it will count themselves lucky. But without them knowing, the virus embedded itself in human DNA, mutating many times over. The mutation remained undetected for decades, but it caused more and more women to become infertile, while having no effect on men. By the time our scientists figured out the problem, the number of women capable of conceiving and giving birth to a child dwindled to less than 1% worldwide." He cast a sad look past her, as if thinking of personal loss. "In 2085, the year I come from, humanity is going extinct. My two sisters will never have children." Julie swallowed hard. "If what you're saying is true, then I don't understand. I mean, if your scientists figured out time travel, surely they can figure out how to eradicate the gene mutation that causes infertility." They tried. They developed a vaccine which works in theory, but only on the few remaining people without the mutation. Besides, with the virus evolving constantly, the vaccine has to change constantly too. It's a constant race against time. And unfortunately, the scientists have been unable to create a treatment. The virus has gotten smarter than our scientists. There's only one thing that will save our world from extinction: to go back to before the virus spreads. To go back to 2025. "To do what?" she asked, though she had a vague idea of what his answer might be. Carter had come to eradicate the virus with their vaccine. Where Julie fit into this was unclear. To bring back women before they get infected with the virus. He looked straight at her. "Women like you. You'll be contracting the virus by October 2nd and fall into a coma on October 6th. You'll never wake up from it." Julie felt as if somebody had taken all the air from her lungs. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. No. She felt a sob work its way up her throat. "That can't be. You must be wrong." Carter moved his arm to bring the hologram closer, then scrolled so fast her eyes could barely follow, until he pulled up several files. "This is your hospital record. UCLA Medical Center. Her eyes flew over the document, confirming what he'd said. They could be false. Anybody can forge documents these days. He scrolled to the next document, an obituary from the newspaper in her hometown. There was her photo, together with her date of birth and death, and a short text about her life. She kept shaking her head. No. No. Carter put his hand on hers and squeezed it. Please believe me. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to bring you back to the future with me. So you can have a full life. And help us repopulate the world. But? Too many things were swirling around in her head. Did she believe him? She still wasn't sure. Too many questions remained unanswered. But can't you just let us have the vaccine, and then this won't happen? That's not an option. But then this virus won't have a chance, and your world is saved too. We can't do that. If we change something in 2025, the 2085 I'll be returning to won't be the same. We're not allowed to change the past, because it will change the future. That's why you're one of the women who were selected. Your death means that you wouldn't have had a chance to contribute something that may have altered the future had you lived. No children, no professional achievement, no inventions that you could have made. Taking you to 2085 will have the same effect as your death by the virus. Her death. She couldn't get past those words. They were so final, so inevitable. But were they true? I want to believe you, I do, but I don't understand all this. I can't. She remembered something. If all this is true, if you know so much about me, then why did you have to break into my room and search it? That doesn't make sense. She motioned to the holocom. This thing, if it's real, should have told you everything you needed to know. There was a regretful look on his face. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it, but I had no choice. Something went wrong during my time jump. I should have arrived 6 months ago, so I would have had time to get to know you, before springing all this on you. But I arrived only a few days ago, and had to act fast. I'd studied the records of where you were 6 months ago. But all that information was useless. You'd moved, and it took me a day to find you. And then you weren't here. I needed to make contact, so I broke in and searched your room in the hope of finding a clue about where you went. I saw your social media post about going to a party. That's why I showed up there. It made sense the way he was explaining it. But one thing was missing. My social media post never mentioned which party I was going to. Do you know how many fraternity parties there are on any given Friday night? You couldn't have found me by looking at my social media. Carter remained silent, but something was going on in his head. She could see it. She could see his mind working. He was keeping something from her. Tell me the truth. How did you find me? She urged him. I wish you wouldn't ask me that. Why? Because you haven't come up with a good answer yet. She shook her head. If you can't answer this, then I have to assume that everything you told me is a lie. Carter blinked his eyes shut and filled his lungs with air. Then he looked at her again. I didn't want to show you this. But. He let the sentence hang there, then scrolled to another document. Julie leaned closer to read it. It was a police report dated, today. She read on. With every line her mouth turned drier, and her pulse began to race. She gasped and slammed her hand over her mouth. And there on the last line was her signature. She was the person who'd filed a police report this morning to report a rape that had occurred at the fraternity party the night before. The perpetrator's name was Todd Sterling. Carter collapsed the holocom. I'm sorry. I didn't want you to have to see this. When I didn't find anything that gave me a hint about which fraternity the party was at, I looked at all the information I was given about you. I found the report. That's how I knew where you were. That's why I knew that Todd had tried to drug you." He put his arm around her, and at the contact, Julie couldn't hold the tears back any longer. She let them flow freely, while Carter drew her into an embrace and gently stroked his hand over her head, as if consoling a child. She didn't need any more proof now. After being attacked by Todd and his friend, she knew what they were capable of. What her fate would have been. And who had saved her from it. Twice. Carter. He'd earned her full trust. Chapter 21. Decision before dawn. Carter cradled Julie in his arms and let her cry until she had no tears left. He wished he'd had a different way of convincing her of the truth of his story. But she'd insisted. In the end, it didn't really matter what had caused Julie to break down, be it the police report or the actual almost rape Carter had been able to prevent by a hair's breadth. It hurt him just the same that he hadn't been able to see this coming. He should have known that a guy like Todd wouldn't just walk away after being humiliated at the party. He was the kind of guy out for revenge. From now on, Carter wouldn't leave Julie's side for even a second. He couldn't allow anybody to hurt her. She was vulnerable enough right now. Her whole world had just come crashing down. She needed him now. And if that meant he'd lend a shoulder for her to cry on, then he would do just that. Right now, nothing else mattered. "Thanks," she murmured and lifted her head to look at him. Her eyes were puffy, but she wasn't any less beautiful in his eyes. He knew then with certainty that his father had been right. "When the right girl comes along, you'll know, son. I'm glad I got here in time. I don't know what I would have done if..." He stopped himself. He knew exactly what he would have done had he found Todd raping Julie. He would have slit his throat. "You came in time," she said, then brought her lips within an inch of his. "Do you think it'll hurt if I kiss you?" His lip was split. "I don't care if it hurts." Julie brushed her lips over his and kissed him gently. He responded, but didn't take charge of the kiss. Instead, he followed her lead, welcoming what she was willing to give him. When she drew her head back, he stroked his knuckles over her cheek. "Tell me what the future is like," she said. "I'm not sure where to start." "What would you like to know?" Carter replied. "Everything." "Like, do people still have regular jobs, or is everything done by robots?" Carter chuckled. "We still work. But a lot of the menial jobs, or the type of jobs that take a toll on one's body, are carried out by machines." "Like what?" "Construction, for example. Building a skyscraper is largely done by machines. No more workers who perform back-breaking labor on a construction site." "But hasn't that created a lot of unemployment? I mean, what are all those construction workers doing now?" "It's freed them up for jobs where human intelligence is needed. Many of the people who would have worked on a construction site now direct the machines and computers that do the work for them. Unemployment is below 1%. In the U.S.? Actually, the U.S. doesn't really exist anymore, not in this form anyway." "You mean we were invaded by another country?" Carter chuckled. "No, that's not what I meant. All countries in the world have come together as one federation, one global entity. Borders have been removed. People can move to wherever their particular skills are necessary." "But how does that work? Won't everybody want to be in the same place, I mean?" She gesticulated with her hands. "Won't they all want to be where they can live a better life? You're assuming that there are poor countries and rich countries. That's not the case anymore. After the final war in 2043, in which the dictators of this world were finally deposed, the Federation went to work to create equitable conditions. They established fair prices for commodities and gave everybody who needed it access to vaccines, healthcare, and the basic necessities. Within 2 decades, all countries had come up to the same standard of living as the formerly rich countries like the United States or like Germany. Julie furrowed her brows. But does that mean the world is now communist? No, far from it. Sure, basic necessities are guaranteed, like healthcare, water, food, and shelter. But once the struggle for mere survival was not on everybody's forefront anymore, people started to strive for self-realization. It made everybody more productive, more satisfied, and it created new inventions, new technologies. So where do you live in 2085? He smiled. Here in Los Angeles. My parents have a house on the beach, in what used to be Century City. Julie shook her head. But Century City isn't on the beach. It's several miles inland. Not in 2085. The oceans rose, before our scientists could get a handle on climate change. It was too late for many coastal cities. Most of Florida is gone. Whole island chains have disappeared. Wide-eyed Julie looked at him. Oh my God. But all the people who lived there. They moved farther inland. Julie sighed. I don't even know what else to ask. I mean, do you have cars that fly? No, we don't, though the technology is there. But there are plenty of other modes of transportation, self-driving cars, high-speed trains, and hypersonic commercial planes. Everything is timed perfectly so that there are no traffic jams. What about the food? Are you still eating meat? Yes, and fish, but most of it is created in large labs. How? With stem cells. We built on research that originated in the 1980s. But I don't know too much about it. As I said, I'm not quite as smart as you. She laughed and slapped his shoulder playfully. It sounds amazing. Not just like a new era, but a new world, Julie mused. In a way it is. It will be for you, though there will be things you'll recognize. The Grand Canyon is still there and remains a protected site. So are Yellowstone and Yosemite. The people in your time did many good things. They preserved nature for the generations that followed. I have to think about all this. It's a lot to take in. Carter swallowed hard. He knew what he had to say next would be difficult. There's something else you need to know about traveling back to 2085. She looked at him, her eyes appearing larger than before. Yes? I don't have a lot of time left here. I should have had 6 months, but as I said before, something went wrong. If I don't initiate the time jump myself, the failsafe will kick in. A failsafe? Doing what? The failsafe in my time travel watch will initiate the time jump automatically in case I'm incapacitated or dead. To bring me or my body back home. When? He looked at the clock on the bedside table. In 30 hours. Julie gasped. I know. It's a big decision you have to make, and we don't have much time. I wish I didn't have to rush you, but if I don't put my time travel watch on my wrist by Monday morning at 2 a.m., I'll be stuck here forever. I won't have a way of returning home. And when the virus sweeps through California in a few days, you'll die, and so will I, because I'm not going to leave your side. Are you saying you would stay here? If I have to. Either we both leave in the next 30 hours, or we both stay. There's no other option. Not for me. She looked at him, an expression of surprise and confusion on her face. But then your mission will fail. There are others like me, time travelers with the same mission. But if you're right about the virus, you'll risk dying here. He took her hands in his. At least I will have experienced true love, even if it's only for a short time. Love? She swallowed. Are you saying you love me? Yes, Julie, I love you. I didn't think it was possible to fall in love with someone in such a short time, but I don't know how else to describe this feeling. If you stay here, I'll stay here, because returning home without you would break my heart. Her eyes filled with tears. Oh, Carter. Please don't cry. Forgive me if I've said something wrong. I didn't mean to hurt you. She shook her head. You're not hurting me. Then why are you crying? Because you love me. Is that such a bad thing? No. It's just something that I didn't expect. She withdrew her hands from his and cupped his face. When I thought you'd deceived me, it broke my heart, because I love you too. His heart swelled with emotion. Before he could lean in to kiss her, she added, I want to have a life with you. Are you saying you're coming back to the future with me? She nodded. Yes. Chapter 22. Body Heat. Carter captured her mouth and kissed her, ignoring his aching lips, his bruised jaw, and his other injuries. When he released her, he said, Then first thing tomorrow morning, we'll go back to my place and retrieve the watches. And what about my friends? How do I explain this? You can't tell anybody the truth. But you won't leave without a goodbye. I promise you. Do you trust me? I do. Julie kissed him, while she eased him back to lie on the bed. His chest was already bare, and now she opened the button of his pants. Carter stopped her and interrupted the kiss. You don't have to do this now. After what happened earlier, I'd fully understand if you don't want to touch any man right now. She sat up, straddling him. We can stop if you're in pain. She lightly brushed her hand over his bruised torso. It doesn't hurt. Not badly anyway. She winked at him. Then I'll just have to be gentle with you. You just lie back and relax. She moved backward and pulled down his zipper. Well, except for one part of you. She laid her hand over the hard-on, hidden behind the fabric. So you just want me for my cock? And that's a problem, why? She smirked mischievously. It's not a problem. Not a problem at all. Just like I thought, she said, and helped him free himself of his clothes, before she pulled her own t-shirt over her head and stripped herself of her panties. A moment later, she was straddling him again, and he liked the feel of it, the feel of Julie taking charge. When she lifted herself up on her knees and brought his cock to her center, he lifted his hand. Ah, Julie, aren't you forgetting something? Forgetting what? The condom. I want to get a head start on repopulating the world, if that's all right with you. A broad grin spread on his face, and his heart filled with warmth, love, and gratitude. Oh, I'm all for a head start. By the time he uttered the last syllable, Julie bore down on his cock, took him inside her hot sheath, and began to ride him. Carter loved the way her perfect breasts bounced up and down with every movement she made. He touched them, caressed them, and Julie obliged him by bending over him so he could kiss them and lick them. He took the rosy buds into his mouth one by one and sucked them, while he squeezed her supple flesh and molded it in his palms. Oh God, Julie, he said between moans, you're so perfect. Perfect for me. He felt her squeeze his cock in her tight channel, bringing him within an inch of losing control, but he forced himself to last, despite the tantalizing way she rode him. Knowing that he was inside her without a barrier, and that tonight they might create the first new life for the future, only added to his excitement. Not only was he succeeding in his mission for his people, for his family, he was also bringing something special back for himself, a woman who loved him, and who he loved. Knowing he wouldn't last much longer, the pleasure too intense, he brought one hand to her sex and found her clit. With every up and down movement, he rubbed his thumb against the engorged organ. Moans of pleasure rolled over Julie's lips. She tossed her head back. Her eyes closed. Her hair flying. Her nipples hard little buds, her sex wet and hot. Yes, yes, don't stop, she begged, all the while continuing to ride him, wilder and faster with each second. He increased the pressure on her clit, taking cues from her movements, until she suddenly gasped. A moment later, her sex spasmed. He let go of the leash he'd kept on himself and came in long, hot spurts, filling her with his seed, until he had nothing more to give. Julie collapsed on his chest, and a wave of pain shot through him, wringing a groan from his throat. Sorry. Julie immediately tried to sit up to relieve him of her weight, but he wrapped his arms around her, loving the feel of her body on top of his despite the pain. Please stay, he murmured into her hair. I need you. She turned her head and said softly, I need you even more. Chapter 23. Clockwork Black. Los Angeles, Sunday, September 28, 2025. They'd overslept. It was no wonder. Carter had made love to her twice more, until she'd finally urged him to rest so his body could heal. Julie had lain awake for a long time after Carter was already sleeping, thinking about all the things he'd told her about her fate. In her heart, she knew he'd spoken the truth about what would happen to her if she stayed here, even if her mind was still catching up. Carter had woken her at 11 o'clock and told her to get ready. They showered and dressed quickly. When they were ready, she asked, What about my friends? They'll file a missing persons report. He pointed to her desk. You'll have to write a letter to them. But what will I say? You'll tell them the truth. The truth? But you said nobody could know. A part of the truth. The part that will assure that we're not changing anything in this timeline. She sat down at her desk, pulled a blank sheet from her printer and a pen from the drawer. You'll tell your roommates that Todd came to rape you, but that a stranger who heard your screams came to help you and prevented it, but that you can't stand the thought of everybody knowing what happened to you, or of you having to testify in a court of law. That's why you're going away for a while, to clear your head. And Steve? He was involved too. But he wasn't involved in the original timeline. You'll have to leave him out of your letter, or it may change his life, and thus the future. My future. Our future. She nodded. She understood, and began writing. When she was done, she put the envelope addressed to Tanya and the girls on her bed, and packed a small backpack with her most important items. She cast a last look at the room, before she and Carter sneaked out through the laundry room on the first floor so they wouldn't be seen by any of her roommates. They couldn't risk any of the girls seeing Carter, and perhaps recognizing him, from Emily's video. They walked to the bus stop and waited, when Carter brushed his knuckles over her cheek. I know it's hard knowing you'll never see them again. But I promise you, my family will welcome you with open arms. My sisters will adore you. My mother will spoil you. She smiled through the tears that clouded her vision. As long as you're with me, I'll get through this. Carter squeezed her hand. I'll be there for you. Always. His promise gave her strength. Soon afterward, they got off the bus and walked the last few blocks to where Carter had been staying since his arrival. It was a motel. She didn't know why it surprised her, but it made sense. A motel provided a certain amount of anonymity. His room had been trashed, evidence of the fight that had taken place there the previous day. Good thing I told the maid that I didn't need her to make up the room on a daily basis, Carter said, then walked to the small closet and opened the top drawer of the two-drawer chest inside. Julie stood next to him. He reached into the drawer, but it was empty. He pulled the second drawer open, but it too was empty. Shit. Carter cursed and looked at her. The watches are gone. Shock coursed through her. A moment later, she guessed what had happened. Todd. He must have taken them when you blacked out. It was the only thing that made sense. That fucking bastard, Carter cursed. He looked at the clock next to the bed. We have to find him and get them back. We've got less than 14 hours until the time jump. The door to the fraternity house was unlocked. Carter felt it was safe to enter, despite the fact that two guys were hanging out in the living room, playing a computer game on the oversized TV. He guessed that while Todd had most likely gone to the hospital to get his knife wound seen to, he wouldn't have gone to the police to report the incident. He couldn't very well tell them that he'd been in the middle of raping a girl when Carter had attacked him. The police would have not only arrested Todd, but also shown up at Julie's to take a statement. When one of the guys in the living room looked at them entering the house, Carter waved. "Hey, just here to check up on Todd. How's he doing?" "He's a literal pain in the butt," the guy replied. His partner laughed. "Good one, bro." "Is he upstairs?" Carter asked. "I forgot which room is his." "Third floor, last on the left." "Thanks, bro," Carter said. He nodded to Julie, and together they went upstairs and found Todd's room. The door was ajar. They entered without knocking. Todd lay on his stomach on the bed, wearing a thin bathrobe and probably nothing else. "Hey bro, get me some ice, will you?" Todd said without looking over his shoulder. Carter exchanged a look with Julie. "Yeah, not gonna happen, Todd," Carter said. Todd turned his head to look at them, while rolling around in a hurry and obviously forgetting his sore butt. Ouch, ouch. The sight and sounds filled Carter with schadenfreude. What the fuck? Todd cursed and tried to get up, but the pain made him slow, and he could only roll back onto his front gradually. "Get the fuck away from me." Carter approached and glared at him. "Just as soon as you give me back what you've stolen." "I didn't steal anything," Todd protested. Julie approached from the other side of the bed. "Give them back," she demanded, then balled her hand into a fist and punched his butt right where the knife wound was. Todd yelled out in pain. Carter cast a look back at the door, but Julie had planned ahead and closed it so the sound wouldn't carry in the large house. "Where are my watches?" Carter ground out and bent down. "You've got 3 seconds or I'll get out my knife. And this time, I'm going for the family jewels. Do you understand me?" Todd's eyes filled with pure fear. Just like Carter had expected. "There." He pointed to his closet. "In the second drawer on the left." "Julie," Carter said while keeping an eye on Todd. Julie went to the closet and opened the specified drawer, retrieved something from it, and then turned around. She held Carter's black time travel watch in her hand. Carter turned his face back to Todd. "Where is the silver one?" He grabbed Todd by his hair and jerked his head up. "It's not even working. It's just some junk." Carter pulled on the idiot's hair until Todd whimpered. "I asked you a question. Where the fuck is my silver watch?" Tears rimmed Todd's eyes. "Steve. He took it." "And where the fuck is Steve?" "Not here. He left." "I've had it with this jerk," Julie cursed and jumped on the bed. Before Carter knew what she was planning, she drove the heel of her shoe into Todd's butt. Between screams of agony, Todd squeezed a few words out. He went to his parents' beach house. Julie jumped off the bed and reached for a piece of paper and pen. Then she thrust it at Todd. "Write down the address." Todd complied quickly. He'd finally gotten the message that neither Carter nor Julie were bluffing. "Here." Julie looked at the address, then at Carter. "That's in Long Beach. We need transportation." Carter glanced around and saw a car key on the desk. He snatched it. "You won't mind us borrowing your car, will you, Todd?" It's not like you can drive in your condition. Todd didn't protest. Where is it parked? Julie asked. Just outside on the street. Julie looked at Carter and reached for the key. I know how to get there. I'm driving. Carter gave her the key, and she handed him the black time travel watch. A BMW, nice. With a look at Todd, she added, I'll try not to get any scratches on it, but I have to warn you, I'm terrible at parking. And not that good at driving either. Todd's horrified look was priceless. Julie was already heading to the door. Carter followed her, then looked over his shoulder and gave him one more warning. If you tell Steve that we're coming, or if he's gone when we get there, I'll be back. Chapter 24. Clockwork Silver. Long Beach, Sunday, September 28, 2025. The drive to Long Beach was a disaster. Simply getting on the freeway had taken forever, and once on it, traffic slowed to a crawl. Carter checked his cell phone to find out why the traffic was more sluggish than what he'd read about LA weekend traffic, and found out that a 4-car accident was blocking all lanes going southbound. Trying to get off the freeway at that point was impossible. They were trapped by other cars without an exit in sight. In 2085, traffic jams were a thing of the past. There were far less cars on the road to start with, since many people worked remotely rather than in large office buildings. In addition, cars were self-driving. They didn't need a human anymore. In fact, eliminating human error had decreased traffic accidents by over 90%. And with every upgrade, the accident rate plummeted. Many freeways had been turned into green spaces. But what Carter was facing here was more than frustrating. No amount of cursing helped, and Carter grew more anxious with every minute that passed. Julie wasn't any calmer either, and he knew what went through her mind. If we don't make it in time, I won't leave you, he promised. Tears welled up in Julie's eyes, but she wiped them away before they could roll down her cheeks. He felt helpless. There was nothing he could do to get out of this situation. By the time the accident site was finally cleared, and the highway patrol reopened several of the lanes, it had already gotten dark. At least the beach house was easy to find. Julie parked in front of the driveway, locking it. Carter was already jumping out of the car and slamming the door shut. Julie was right behind him as he rushed to the entrance door and rang the doorbell. He listened to any sounds coming from inside the house. There was music. Then the door opened. Carter recognized Steve, who wore swimming trunks and nothing else. Water purled off his skin and hair. When he recognized Carter, Steve immediately slammed the door shut, but Carter had already jammed his foot between door and frame, preventing Steve from closing the door. Carter pushed against it, and was helped by the fact that Steve's wet feet were sliding on the tile floor. He managed to push the door open, and charged inside just as Steve fell backward and landed on his ass. His injured arm was bandaged in white gauze and wrapped in cling film to prevent it from getting wet. What the fuck do you want? Steve looked up from the floor, trying to get up. Haven't you done enough damage? He motioned to his arm. Apparently not, Carter said. Behind him, Julie entered the house, then shut the door. Carter pointed to his black time travel watch he was now wearing on his wrist. Where is the silver one? Steve squinted, as if he couldn't see what Carter was pointing to. What? He got to his feet. My silver watch. Where is it? How should I know? Steve asked, shrugging. You and Todd stole my watches. Todd took the black one, which I took off him. He said you have the silver watch. So, where the fuck is it? Carter growled. It's a piece of junk. I tossed it. Carter lunged at him, grabbing his neck. You did what? I tossed it in the trash, Steve squeezed out through his narrowed windpipe. Where? Carter asked, not letting go of his throat. At the frat house. In the dumpster behind it. If you're lying. It's the truth. I swear. He lifted his arms in surrender. I don't want any more trouble. That's why I'm here. I'm done with Todd and the crap he pulls off. Carter let go of his throat. Do you believe him? Julie asked. Carter looked at her, then back at Steve. Should I believe you? He grabbed Steve's injured arm and pressed tightly where he'd cut the bastard the day before. Steve screamed in pain. Fuck. I told you, it's in the trash behind the frat house. Carter glared at him. If it's not there. It is, I swear. I'm not an idiot. I've seen what you did to Todd. I don't want the same happening to me. Good. Then he looked at Julie. Let's go. They quickly jumped into the car and got back on the freeway. The traffic going north was much lighter than what they'd experienced when going southbound. Carter looked at the dashboard clock. Julie tossed him a sideways look. We should be there in 45 minutes if the traffic stays like this. Julie was right. Or she would have been, but shortly before the Wilshire Boulevard exit, the one leading to UCLA campus, the engine suddenly sputtered and the car slowed. Julie was forced to pull into the right lane, the off-ramp at the Olympic and Pico Boulevard exit, until the car came to a full stop on the right shoulder. What's going on? Carter stared at Julie. She studied the dashboard, then looked at him. We're out of gas. Gas? This car runs on gas. Julie nodded. What else would it run on? Nuclear fission. You're kidding. By 2085, everything is powered by nuclear fission. It's much more economical than fossil fuels. Sure, in some corners of the world, there are still some communities that haven't caught up, and they're still using solar and wind, and even geothermal energy, but fossil fuels? No way. Julie sighed. Yeah, well, we're out of that. Fuck. Chapter 25. Back to the Future. Los Angeles, Monday, September 29th, 12:45 a.m. Fuck. Carter cursed. Julie stared at Carter, panic tightening her throat. We have to leave the car here. She opened the car door, but before she was able to get out, another car whizzed by, sending a shockwave through her. Her heart raced. My side, Carter instructed, opened his door and got out. Then he helped Julie crawl over to the passenger side and step out of the car. Together, they ran along the shoulder, up to the end of the exit ramp to the closest street. There they stopped. Julie oriented herself. We can get an Uber, she said, pulling her phone from her handbag. A what? Carter asked. A ride service, like a taxi, she explained, while already pulling up her account to request a ride. The app pinpointed her location, and she typed in the address of the fraternity house. Moments later, the app indicated that the system was looking for an available car. The wheel spun and spun. Come on, she urged the app. What's taking so long? Carter asked, looking at the phone. I don't know. A few more seconds that felt like minutes, and the app finally came back with the result. The next car available was almost 40 minutes away. And from experience, she knew that this was just an estimate. The pickup time could change depending on the traffic the driver encountered. That's cutting it too close, he said. How about the bus? Julie shook her head. After midnight, they run only every hour, and there's no direct line from here to the campus. We'd have to change at least once. Then we have to run. Julie punched the fraternity house's address into her map app. It was over 3 miles to walk, which the app calculated at an hour and 10 minutes. Running would get them there faster. She motioned, to a pedestrian crossing. That way. Sepulveda Boulevard will take us toward Westwood. Carter took her hand, and they started running. Julie wasn't a particularly accomplished jogger. In fact, it had been a while since she had gone for a run, and she felt it now. She was out of shape. She was glad for each traffic light that forced them to stop for a few moments until it was safe to cross. She became more and more winded, but she didn't complain. She knew what was at stake. She could rest once they arrived in the future. "You okay?" Carter asked with a sideways glance at her without slowing down. "I'm good." She didn't tell him that she felt breathless, but the way he looked at her, she could tell that he knew. "We'll make it, Julie, I promise you. Even if I have to carry you the last bit." She hoped it didn't come to that, and continued pushing herself. They'd already crossed underneath Interstate 10, which meant they were already in Westwood. At the next major intersection, they turned right into Ohio Avenue, then a few blocks later turned north again onto Veteran Boulevard, the road running parallel to the Los Angeles National Cemetery, which now came into sight. Carter pointed toward the cemetery. "We can't be far now. That's where the time jump deposited me." She nodded, then pointed to the right, where the streets were going up a gentle incline. "Gailey Avenue is over there." The gentle incline of the side streets they soon ran along didn't feel that gentle to Julie right now. She was out of breath, huffing and puffing. "You have to go on without me," she said. He looked at her. "I can't leave you here." She was starting to wheeze. The fraternity house was only 3 blocks away, but she couldn't go any further. "Please, go and get the watch and come back here," she begged, but the look on his face told her that he had no intention of doing so. "I'll carry you," he said, and lifted her up into his arms. A moment later, he'd heaved her over his shoulder, her torso hanging over his back, while he held on to her thighs and began running. He was slower now, but was still running at a fast clip. Julie couldn't even protest. It felt like an eternity, until he finally turned off the road and entered a short driveway. They'd arrived at the fraternity house. Carter continued running with Julie slung over his shoulder, until they reached the back of the house. There he placed her back on her feet. He was breathing hard too, but he didn't rest for even a second. His eyes darted around the dark, only the moonlight guiding him, when he pointed to a spot. "There, the trash cans." Rested from being carried, Julie ran toward them and pulled out her cell phone. She glanced at the clock. They had 8 minutes left, and 3 large trash cans to search. She pointed the Spotlight app of her cell phone at the trash cans. They were tall and wide. She had an idea. "Let's tip them over and toss everything on the ground." Carter followed her suggestion, and within seconds the contents of all 3 trash cans were strewn on the ground. The smell was disgusting, and the many bottles and beer cans had made an awfully loud noise when they clanked together. With the aid of their 2 cell phones, they sorted through the trash. When something silver reflected back at Julie, she dove for it, only to realize that it was nothing more than an aluminum food wrapper. Carter had the same issue, if his low curses were anything to go by. "It has to be here," Carter said, his voice sounding increasingly worried. Unless Steve had lied. But Julie didn't voice that thought. Instead, she frantically continued searching. For a second, she turned her cell phone back to look at the clock. 2 minutes left. Her breath caught and tears shot to her eyes. They were almost out of time. From the side of the house, she suddenly heard a noise. With it, the beam of a flashlight zigzagged along the house, moving closer. "Got it," Carter suddenly said and bent down. When she looked at his hand, she saw the silver watch. "Somebody's coming," Julie whispered and hurried to his side. He immediately gripped her arm and put the watch around her wrist. She tried to help him close it, when a flashlight's beam hit her in the face. "Shit," she cursed. "Fucking dumpster divers," the man whose body she couldn't see cursed. "You're gonna clean that up, or I'll shoot you." "Whoa, whoa," Carter said, finally having managed to close the watch's wristband. He lifted his arms, and Julie did the same. "Don't shoot." Julie wasn't sure that the guy really had a gun. Not too many people living in this area did, but there was always the possibility that he was indeed armed. "We didn't mean any harm," Julie said. "Yeah, I can see that," the guy snorted in disgust. He shifted the flashlight, and now she saw that he really did have a gun. He was pointing it at them. "You're picking this up right now, or—" The rest of his words faded away. Everything around her suddenly dissolved into pixels, everything except Carter. He'd lowered his arms and reached for her hand, holding it tightly. In a world where everything around them swirled and turned so fast that the different colors blended, Julie and Carter were the only objects remaining still. Julie felt no movement. Her feet were still planted on terra firma, while the world around her and Carter turned. Suddenly, a whiteness spread around them, before it dimmed, and the pixels assembled again and formed a new world around her. Carter was still holding her hand. But the fraternity house was gone. In its stead, a modern building of glass stood against bright sunlight. Carter put his arm around her waist. "Welcome to 2085. She turned her face to him. "You did it. We did it. Together." "Together," she said, and felt tears of relief run down her cheeks. Carter pulled her into an embrace and kissed her until her tears dried. Then he took her hand into his. "Let's go home." "I love you," Julie murmured. He smiled at her. "I love you more." Thank you for listening to this audiobook. The next book in the series is Harbinger of Destiny.